Folks, it is Monday. Back to another fun-filled evening of pre-licensing class. All kinds of fun-filled stuff that we will be going over. Let's do this. Let me click the record button real quick.
Recording in progress.
There we go. Saw a couple messages, tried to answer them to the best of my ability. I will make kind of a side note just because I didn't actually formally answer it. Tim, you asked a question about the excise tax homework. That one is just, text. And I think the intention for that one is just to write out the answers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on a piece of paper, take a picture, and just upload it, and you're fine. There's no formal thing to download on that one because it is just, embedded into that text. Does that make sense?
Yes. I just did a screenshot and dropped it in a PDF and just, updated it and then uploaded it.
Yep, that's perfect.
I know at some point in time you'll get to those things to kind of, check the answers.
Yep, that's exactly right. I'll kind of, probably this week start kind of going through the ones that y'all have done thus far, just kind of going through them, formally approving them in that system and everything like that. So I just want to make sure that I didn't leave anything specifically unanswered there. Folks, as per usual.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I will open it up to anything that y'all may have questions on at this point, whether it be from materials, studying, moving ahead, not moving ahead. If it's moving ahead, I probably won't answer it actually because we're going to get into it. But anything in particular y'all need me to answer before we kick off where we left off? Everybody's feeling alive and well and okay. Yeah, all right, cool. Let me share my screen here. So, if you don't recall, by the way, on a side note too, if you haven't been following it, I did get several more of the videos edited and uploaded to the YouTube page. And so after probably this week, I'll be caught up. Because we only had 2 days of class last week because of the holiday. And so I think I've got like the first 5 days, and then the other ones I will get, caught up through all of last week, probably by Friday, most likely, hopefully, that's the plan. So, in case you were looking for those are there. Let me kind of circle back around to some of the things we talked about last week. Last week, we've kind of wrapped up some of the introductory sections. We got through land use controls, dealing with public versus private land use controls, and making sure that you understood some of the verbiage or terminology, whatever you want to call it, in those sections, like a non-conforming use, which could be legal or illegal. Means it does not match the current zoning ordinances, the rules that are set by the government for what they want to see in a given area. We also talked about things like variances, special or conditional use permits, roads being public or private, and then of course the being turned over to the DOT, the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act, a lot of different things we talked about last week in that section. And then we got into environmental. Now, folks, there was a lot of different things we talked about in environmental, and that's where we kind of ended. But I want to just recap some of the most testable things within environmental. So let's start with lead-based paint. What did I tell you were the two most important things with lead-based paint? There is a word and a year that you need to memorize. What was the word? What was the year?
Year was 1978.
The year was 19... say it again?
Encapsulated.
No, not that one. We did talk about that one a little bit, but there is a very important word that went along with that 1978. Before or prior. There you go. Homes built prior to 1978. Does be very careful, because if you have a test question that says a home was built in 78, they're trying to screw with you, right? They're trying to trick you into thinking it has something to do with lead-based paint disclosure. And so in homes built prior to 1978, it requires the lead-based paint hazard disclosure, where they have to say, yes, I do know, or no, I don't know. And if you have reports, provide them. And we're going to delve into some topics here in a little bit that will, kind of make me come back around to that. But very important to understand that there's no obligation to remove lead. There's no obligation to test for it. It's just a disclosure on whether you do or don't know. And then buyers have to be given a 10-day assessment period, no matter which state we're talking about, to do testing if they so desire. Now, we did talk about the word encapsulated, but I warned you that that's probably a more testable word within asbestos. I'm not going to say you're not going to see it, just because I've heard it before come out of people's mouths in regard to lead-based paint, but it's more testable with asbestos. And so remember, asbestos is a mineral that was used because of its insulating and fire-resistant properties. It's, once again, not dangerous just being beside it, but when it becomes friable, meaning the particulates are small and they get into the air, and then you can breathe them in, that's when it's considered dangerous. And what did I tell you, just on that same topic, what did I tell you was the preferred method of abatement or remediation for asbestos?
Encapsulation.
There's that word, encapsulation. Because when we seal it up and those particulates can't become friable, we've really kind of rendered it, no longer dangerous. Can it be removed? Yes. But because of the nature of it, it is very expensive because you have to fully saturate it. It's got to be completely soaking wet, and then you have to have certain companies that are certified to remove it, and it has to go to a designated landfill for those types of things. So all that can be done. So then we went on to talk about some just other honorable mentions that you may see. Formaldehyde, which can be used in pressed boards, can cause irritation of eyes. Urea formaldehyde, which can be an insulation. We talked about underground storage tanks. The big thing there is that they can cause environmental contaminations, and because there is no grant money left anymore from some of these things like CERCLA, that the owner of the property that has an underground storage tank is probably liable for the cleanup, even though they may not have been the ones who put the underground storage tank there. We talked about radon. What is radon?
It's a gas that can come up into your house.
What else can you tell me about it? It's a gas. Come up into your house.
Radioactive, odorless, colorless, and tasteless gas.
There you go. It is caused by naturally occurring radioactive materials in the soil that decay, and it is a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas. Now, I introduced a term last week, and we're going to use that term a lot tonight as we get into the agency section. That term was a material fact. So let me ask you this. Is radon gas always a material fact?
No.
When is it?
On inspection, if it shows up.
If it shows up, but more specifically,
Level?
the level. What did the level have to be at?
Over 4.
There you go. 4 picocuries per liter or higher. Okay, 4 picocuries per liter or higher. And so that was really, a lot of the environmental conversations we had. So let me ask you a couple little recap questions before we move into the really big, really important, super, super, duper, duper testable topic of the night, which is agency, okay? Here's a couple questions just to wrap up the environmental that we didn't get to, I don't believe. True or false, sellers/listing brokers are responsible for guaranteeing that no lead-based paint hazards exist in properties built prior to 1978.
False.
Fact.
False.
False.
No, false.
Folks, you got to be very careful. We have very, very few absolutes in real estate. There's defaults, but pretty much everything has an except. So if you see words like guarantee, absolutes, in any way, shape, and form, that's probably not the answer. I'm not going to say there's no absolutes, but there's like maybe 3 that exist within the entire curriculum. So most of the time when you see absolutes, probably not going to be the answer there, right? So The only requirement under the Lead-Based Paint Hazard Reduction Act of 1992 was that we provided disclosure, or the seller more specifically provides a disclosure to the buyer for any home built prior to 1978. Now, I will amend my previous statement to a buyer or a residential long-term lease. If you were leasing it for a long-term rental, it would also require that disclosure. Short-term rentals, commercial properties, no-go. But the long-term rentals and purchases, they just have to be given this disclosure. And it's important to note that the seller has to answer this truthfully. They're not allowed to, lie. They're not allowed to withhold information. That's going to be a more significant topic in a moment when I tell you about some very unique disclosure laws and rules in North Carolina as we get into agency. So how about this one? True or false, having a qualified remediator carefully remove all asbestos from a property is the preferred method of abatement or remediation?
False.
False. We just said it. What's the preferred method?
Encapsulation.
Encapsulation. There you go. There is no, it's not really ideal, as I said, to go in there with a chainsaw and a sledgehammer and start ripping out stuff. If it's more dangerous when it gets activated and into the air. And so it's possible, but it's very expensive. How about this one? True or false? The presence of radon gas in any residential property is a material fact that must be disclosed to all interested parties.
False.
False. What's it got to be at?
It's going to be at a level 4 higher.
Bam, there you go. 4 picocuries per liter or higher. So, environmental, not a super testable subject, but I'm telling you, without a doubt, the most testable things: asbestos, lead-based paint. You got to know about the disclosure. I don't think you need to know that the Lead-Based Paint Hazard Reduction Act was in 1992. When we get to other topics, the years become important. But the important year for the lead-based paint is that prior to 1978, which is that trigger. Because I told you they outlawed the use of lead-based paint in 78 in residential properties. Same thing as asbestos around that same time in residential properties. So, that's your fun little recap there. Which leads us to one of my favorite topics to talk about. Agency. Now, before I go into this, I'm just going to start giving you some very important insight to be aware of, to get your minds right. I'm going to give you some backstory. I'm going to explain some things without the slides, okay? And then, of course, we'll bring some slides into the mix. So let's first start with the term agent. We had this discussion on night 1. What did I tell you an agent was? What's an agent?
Representative.
Somebody that's registered with whatever municipality, realtor organization you have is.
Not that one. Somebody said something else. Did somebody say a representative? Is that what somebody said?
I said a representative. You represent.
Yeah. I'll take that word. Folks, have you ever heard of anybody being called an agent other than for real estate? Yeah.
Yeah.
Insurance agent, sports players, right? Athletes, they have agents. Celebrities, they have agents. All an agent is somebody who represents somebody else, who looks after their best interest, who is working for them, right? Tom Cruise has an agent that gets him into all of his movies. Patrick Mahomes has an agent. There's a million different types of agents that exist out there, so it's very important for you to understand that term, that's all it means. Doesn't mean real estate. So this is where you got to start training your brains. On top of the fact that, yes, you have a national portion of your exam and a state portion of your exam. More than that, I want you to realize that certain things have nothing to do with real estate. There are going to be agency-related questions that deal with real estate, but there also might just be general agency questions. And you have to understand that not all agents deal with real estate, but they're still agents. It's just somebody representing somebody else. And so let me give you an example of an agent that's not, well, let me provide a comparison here, folks. Can you buy a house in North Carolina, or any state for that matter, without an agent?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Can you sell a house in North Carolina without an agent?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
So why do people hire agents?
To protect themselves.
To protect themselves. Well, why do they need somebody to help protect them?
To make
Their
sure
experience.
that everything is in order.
To make sure that everything is in order. I like that. Folks, you hire an agent because what you would like to have is somebody more knowledgeable in a topic, more experienced than you in a topic, helping you and advocating for you and looking out for your best interest. And so let me provide a comparison of another agent that exists that we don't call an agent. How about an attorney? When you get arrested, do you have to have an attorney?
No, but you're better off with me.
Well, there you go. You can represent yourself when you go to a hearing. That's not a good idea, because do you know all the laws and all the rules that hopefully an attorney does? No, folks, to the extent that when you hire an attorney, we've all seen Law and Order. Somebody hires an attorney and they look their attorney in the face and they're like, oh yeah, no, I stabbed that guy 62 times. And their attorney's like, dang it, man, making me work harder. Because what are they going to do? Even though they know they're a murderer, they're going to advocate for this person. They're going to look after their best interest. And so an agent is somebody more experienced than you that looks after your best interest to try to get you the best possible outcome. Does this make sense? So when I say the word agent, it's not automatically real estate. Don't forget that in the test. There are going to be times where they just want to know about agency relationships. Somebody acting on behalf of somebody else, right? But of course, then we're going to get into the more specifics of representation within real estate transactions. So let me give you a backstory on agency that I think is important to help you understand everything that I'm about to teach you. And it's also really weird because things are kind of coming full circle, right? You can't make this stuff up. But let me just give you a mini history lesson, all right? Once upon a time, real estate has been around for a very long time, but real estate was a very kind of mom and pop business, right? We had real estate brokers who would be hired by sellers, okay? People who owned real estate would hire agents, real estate agents, to come and assist them in selling their house. And so what would happen is, let's say Kingsley called me up and he said, Seth, I need to sell my house. If I was a real estate agent, I would come and I would represent Kingsley as the seller, and I would market the property, and I would try to find Kingsley a buyer. And so these buyers would call me up and they say, oh, I'd like to see your listing. And I say, great. And I would go and I would show them that listing. But understand, these buyers didn't have representation. They were looking at this house as just a buyer. We'll call them an unrepresented buyer. They didn't have an agent. Everybody okay with that statement? So when I found a buyer that was interested in Kingsley's property, I may have wrote up an offer for them and handed it off to Kingsley. But no matter what I did for this buyer, who was I working for?
Kingsley.
Kingsley. It is very important for y'all to understand that. For the longest time, buyers didn't have any representation. Every real estate agent worked for the seller, every single one. And so as time went on, here's what happens. The real estate agents would continue to market the properties, but I want you to picture this. Let's say that I meet up with a buyer and I take them to, Misty's house, because now I'm working for Misty. Misty hired me to sell her house. And I meet up with a buyer and I take this buyer to Misty's house. And this buyer doesn't like Misty's house. Well, folks, if I don't have any other listings, that buyer is just really not going to mean much to me, right? Because if they're not buying the only house I have for sale, they don't do much for me. Until one day that agents had this epiphany. So I'm selling Misty's house. I meet up with a buyer. And they don't like Misty's house, but they described to me what they are looking for. And my buddy Corey, who's a real estate agent, has a listing that sounds just like that. And so I pick up the phone and I call Corey and I say, hey, Corey, listen, man, I want to talk to you about something. He said, what you got? I said, well, I got this buyer who, was ready to buy a house and my listing didn't work for him. Okay. And my seller's house didn't work for him. But I think your seller's house might be a good fit for this buyer. And Corey says, well, great, send him over. And I said, well, Corey, I'm happy to, but listen, because I found this person, if it works out, can we work out a deal where you're going to, give me something? Corey says, yeah, sure. And so this is where referral fees come into play. Because I referred a buyer to Corey who, maybe was going to be a good fit for his house. So Corey and I come up with this agreement. I send this buyer over. Corey shows this buyer the house. They buy it. And Corey cuts a check and he sends it to me for sending him this buyer that he didn't have before. And so here it was. Corey didn't have to work as hard for a buyer because I found it for him. I didn't have to work that hard at all because I showed one house to this buyer and sent it over. And I got this mailbox money is what I like to call it. And I'm like, man, that's a pretty sweet deal. So folks, this thing picked up, right? This caught on. And so everybody started doing this. But then let me give you another example, okay? So let's say that I've done this, a dozen times now. So now I'm selling Sam's house. And I get a phone call, or let me rephrase that. I'm selling Sam's house. I get a phone call from Eliza as a buyer, okay? Eliza calls me up, wants to see Sam's house that I'm listing, and I'm, working for Sam on. So I take Eliza to go see this house, and Eliza doesn't like Sam's house yet again. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, you know what? I think Eliza might like Sandeep's house. He's got a listing. Okay, so I pick up the phone and I call Sandeep. I said, hey, Sandeep, I got a buyer named Eliza. I think she might like your listing. She's not going to do, she's not into mine. Would you pay me a referral fee? And Sandeep says, well, you know what, Seth? I'm actually really busy and I've done a couple of these referral fees. He said, I got a proposition for you. I said, okay, great. What you got? He said, how about this? You and this buyer come to my office and you pick up the keys and you take her over there to see this property. And if she likes it, you write up the offer and you hand it to me. And if we come to terms, instead of 25%, I'll give you half. I said, so you're basically giving me half of what you're making? He said, yep. I'm just, that way it makes it worth your while to do this. If it works out, it's less work for me. So I'll share the money with you. It'll all be fine. And I said, okay, great. So I say, Eliza, great. We're going to go see this property. I think this might be a good fit for you. So Eliza hops in my car and we drive over to Sandeep's office and we grab the keys. And on the way, I said, Eliza, you like coffee? You want some coffee? And we stop and we get some coffee. And I'm just chit-chatting with Eliza about her life and everything she's got going on. And then we drive over to this listing that Sandeep has, this house is for sale. And I take her in there. So when we get there, right, we see Sandeep sign in the yard. We see Sandeep's brokerage firm. We go into this house. We're walking around. Eliza loves it. And she wants to put in an offer. And so I write up this offer for Eliza and I send it over to Sandeep. The offer gets accepted and we get under contract. And we close on this house and Sandeep shares half of what he charged the seller with me. Now I want you to think about something in the scenario that I just gave you. Who did I work for?
The buyer. The listing agent.
The listing
Or
agent.
the other listing agent.
The listing agent. More specifically, the seller.
As a sub-agent.
Correct. So folks, this is a term that is very testable, and it is called seller subagency. So I really want you to understand this. Let me just write this up on this picture here, okay? I work for ABC Realty. Sandeep worked for XYZ Realty. Because I told you, I mean, it was very mom and pop, right? He probably had his own firm, and, you know, I probably had my own firm, or I worked for a very small little brokerage firm. And so we were not at the same, make sure I spell your name right, Sandeep. We were not at the same firm, but we just agreed that, you know, we would facilitate it this way, okay? And so I worked, even though we're a different firm, everybody worked for sellers only. Now, I want you to think about this. I worked for Sandeep, and more specifically, Sandeep's seller. But who did Eliza probably think I worked for?
She thought you worked for her.
She thought I worked for her. She was in my car. We were talking about her kids, playing soccer. I took her and bought her coffee. I told her about my life. We were riding around together, and we went and saw this house. She probably thought I worked for her, especially when we got to that house. And Sandeep's sign was in the yard, not mine. And so, folks, this was a premise of a big class action lawsuit back in like the 80s. I don't remember the exact date. It was called the Adena lawsuit. It was in like Missouri or somewhere like that. And that's not testable. But there was basically a situation where a buyer purchased a property, and she was told by her agent that it had a in-ground irrigation system. And it didn't. So she bought the house, and she found out after the fact there's no in-ground irrigation system. And so she went to an attorney. She was mad. She went to an attorney, and she wanted to go after this agent. And here's what she said to the attorney. I want to go after my agent because he told me that there was a sprinkler system or an in-house irrigation system, and there wasn't. And most attorneys are like, no, that's stupid. We can't, you know, whatever. But when she said that to one attorney says, wait, hold up 1 second. Were you the buyer? She says, yeah. He says, well, stupid, you didn't have an agent. She's like, what do you mean? No, of course I did. He said, no, you didn't. Buyers don't have agents. All agents work for the seller. And then she was just flabbergasted and confused. She said, wait a second. I thought this person worked for me. And the attorney's like, no. But I see your confusion. And so this is where they actually went and pursued a big class action lawsuit. Because they realized that this lady actually thought that she had representation, and she didn't. And then they basically put out a thing. They said, well, did you think the same thing? And all these people came forward. They're like, hell yeah, we did. What do you mean we didn't have an agent? There was somebody showing us these houses. There was somebody writing up offers for us. There was all these different things. And so, number one, they won this lawsuit. It was a huge lawsuit. A huge lawsuit. And a huge amount of money. So the federal government caught wind of this, and they were livid. Okay, because here we are, there's all this crap going down. The federal government, this was basically within every state had their own jurisdiction, and they still do to this day. So here's what the federal government said to the states. The real estate commissions, or whatever they're called in these respective states, they said, listen, if you don't fix this, we will. The last thing that the states want is the federal government getting involved in this kind of thing, right? And so they said, okay, we got to fix this, and we got to fix this now. And so they all kind of, started talking about it. And I want you to think about this, folks. What is the easiest way to fix this issue where buyers thought they had representation and they didn't?
Buyer agency.
Give them representation. So buyer agency was invented. Up until that point, buyers never had representation. But now they do. And so this is a very important kind of history lesson to understand how it exists currently. Now, the ironic thing is some of these big class action lawsuits going on now, now that they're going to backtrack us if it goes the way that people want it to go. But we're not going to get into that because that's outside of the scope of, pre-licensing course. But does this make sense for everybody?
For the most part, only question I have is because it made sense that the buyer didn't have representation, that it worked for the seller originally, like the first part of the story or whatever that you were talking about, because they don't get paid by the buyer. They still don't get paid by the buyer, and so I mean, like they work for them, but kind of, sort of, still not really.
So that's an excellent question. So let me provide some clarity here, folks. You have to understand that real estate is one of the weirdest things, because understand that the money has nothing to do with who you work for. So I want you to think about this. In that scenario, and I'm just going to throw some numbers here. We'll talk more about this later. But in that scenario, maybe Sandeep told the seller that he was going to charge them 6%. And because of the special deal that Sandeep and I worked out, he gave me 3 of that. So they were already sharing commission with somebody. It just so happened that we were technically on the same team because we all worked for the sellers. The only thing that changed is, okay, well, we're still sharing the commission, but because a seller is not making any money until they have a buyer, we said, okay, we'll keep paying the buyer's agent, but now they're allowed to actually represent the buyer. And so it's really weird. I want you to think about it. We just all watched the Super Bowl with the 49ers and the Chiefs. It would be like the Chiefs paying the 49ers quarterback. It doesn't make any sense, does it? But that's what we do. It has nothing to do with who is paying you, and everything to do with who you promise to look after. So yeah, even today, the money is typically coming from the seller, or at least the seller's agent, and they are sharing that money with the buyer's agent, the person who is looking after the best interest of the buyer. Contradictory, but that's how we do it. What you got, Stephanie?
Is it always split 50-50?
No.
Okay.
Yep. So it is very important to understand that monies do not dictate loyalty in this regard. Doesn't matter where the money comes from. It's all about who you said you're going to represent. We have this by way of what we call agency agreements. Who have I agreed to look after? Who have I agreed to represent? Everybody still okay?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for explaining that.
So we've got a lot of different conversations to have within agency. And of course, a lot of the more specific ones in regard to, you know, how these relationships are formed and who we represent. But let me go ahead and introduce some verbiage, okay? Because it is very testable verbiage, and some people do not do a good job of explaining it. And so I'm just going to go ahead and put some words up here. And I might type them because, you know, it's very hard to do with a mouse. So I'm going to type in the word listing. So listing is a very powerful word. When we say listing agent, that person works for the seller. You can take that to the bank because they are in the act of listing. Listing is when you have a house that you are marketing for sale. So you're called the listing agent. Well, you can also, oops, let me go back here. Be called the seller's agent. Notice that possessive, the agent of the seller. Seller's agent, listing agent, those are synonyms. If I say listing agent, where is that person's loyalties? The seller. No ifs, ands, buts, or coconuts, right? So listing agent, seller's agent, same thing. These words are going to matter a lot on the test because they may just give you a very long in-depth thing, and somewhere they will eke it in there, seller's agent, listing agent, and you always have to look at it and say, okay, whom does this person represent? So on the other side, I'm going to introduce a word that we very commonly use. Instead of listing agent, there's another terminology called a selling agent. Now, folks, listen to me. This is the only dangerous word or the dangerous terminology that you have to be aware of. Because all selling agent means, or selling means, is you brought the buyer. That's all selling means. But understand that you could have brought the buyer as a seller subagent, or you could have brought the buyer as a buyer's agent. And so if you are a seller subagent, like I just did in that scenario, it still exists. If you are a seller subagent, where are your loyalties?
To the listing agent.
To the listing agent, and by transitive property, the seller. Does that make sense? But you did bring a buyer. Sometimes, because remember, sometimes people elect not to be represented, just like attorneys, just like buying houses. So it could be that a buyer does not want to be represented by us, so we can't be their agent, but we could still help them, but we would not be working for them. So selling is a dangerous word. It will never tell you where your loyalties reside. All it means is you brought the buyer. But you could have brought the buyer as a seller subagent working for the seller. You could have brought the buyer as a buyer's agent. Now, once again, notice that possessive. Buyer's agent means your loyalties are where?
With the buyer.
With the buyer. Bam. See how that works? So I'm going to put, and let me see if I can pull it up real quick, and I'll actually share it with you. Let me find it. I'm going to show you this document. There we go. Listing. And I'll put it in your little group chat. Because this is a big point of confusion for a lot of people. And I do not want it to be. Listing always means works for the seller. Selling means you brought the buyer. Okay? So listing agents market the properties for the seller. Selling agents help buyers find new properties. Furthermore, let me get the next page here. Oops. There you go. So I will actually put this PDF of this form, once it expands up here, into your document so you can see this. But listing agent always works for the seller. They get hired by way of a listing agreement. It says it right in the name. The agreement that you sign to represent a seller is called a listing agreement. The agreement that you have to represent the buyer is called a buyer agency agreement. Now, we'll talk more about seller subagency in a little bit, but it's very important to understand. Seller's agent always works for the seller. Buyer's agent always works for the buyer. Listing agent always works for the seller. Selling agent, nobody knows. You'd have to have more information if all we say is selling. Everybody okay with this so far? So let me introduce another exceptionally important piece of verbiage that you have to understand with this agency topic. What you got, Adriana?
So, for example, in new constructions, if there is like a mobile office and then there's an agent there, is that a selling agent then?
Yes. Understand that this is where it gets confusing, right? Because, and we're going to get there, if you were to go to a new construction on site agent. Well, folks, who does that person work for? The builder, which is the seller. So they are the listing agent. But if you go in as an unrepresented buyer and you talk to them about purchasing a home, they are also in the act of selling. So they would be the listing agent and the selling agent, but they're never the buyer's agent.
So if that person buying a house in the sales office with that agent, she will pay commission, like buyer commission for this selling agent, or no?
So let me stop you there. Don't worry about the money yet. One of the biggest things that people get so caught up in is the money, who's getting paid, who's not getting paid. You got to take that out of this so far. We'll get there, but don't worry about the money yet. Ultimately, there's not going to be anybody getting any money other than the listing agent in that new construction scenario because there is nobody else.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you some more examples of this because this always provokes some really good questions. But hang tight on a lot of these because I'm going to give you a lot of examples and we're going to kind of dig a little bit deeper, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. So let me introduce another very important piece of verbiage. And folks, these are all exceptionally important, which is why I'm like, don't even worry about slides. I just need you to listen to me, okay? Can I just assume that every single one of you in here probably has a person or a place that you go to get your hair did? Right? Everybody probably, yeah. Go to get your hair cut, go to get, even if, if your mama does it, it's probably not going to really work. But you all know what it's like to go to a place and get your hair cut. So let's just assume that you all have somebody who cuts your hair. And I'm going to say something. I'm going to make a statement, okay? Do not overread into this statement. I'm not trying to trick you. I need you to understand something. And if you've taken this class before, don't ruin it for everybody else. If somebody comes in to, or let's say you go into your hair person's salon, barbershop, or whatever, and there they are standing there, and you've gone to them for years. And when you walk in, they see you, and they say, "Hey, there they are. There's my favorite customer." Is that okay for them to say? Don't overread into this.
Yes.
It's absolutely okay for them to say. I'm not worried about hurting anybody's feelings that's in the room, okay? Pretend there's nobody else in the room. So, like, if you do hair and you're like, oh, no, that's going to offend somebody else, don't worry about that. That's not the point, okay? So they looked at you. You're the only other person in the room. And they said, "There's my favorite customer." Okay? I'm going to change one thing about the scenario. You walked in. They're there. You're the only people in the room. So it's not about offending people. And they say to you, "There's my favorite client." Does that hold any difference to you folks in general? No, don't think about it from the class point of view. Would you think anything differently in a real world if somebody called you a customer versus a client?
I would,
Why?
because a client is, in my world at least, a client is somebody who already works with us, is part of, has bought into our services. A customer is brand new, but that's just from my experience.
I see her logic, and I gotta say,
Sure, but for most people, what if you were saying a grocery store? Somebody comes in and buys stuff. Call them a customer, call them a client. I see what you're saying, but the thing is, for most people with very innocuous jobs or, relationships, it doesn't really feel that different to most of us. Maybe if your career has, dictated that it is. And so this is an important distinction because, Kirsten, just like your job, in the real estate world, they do hold very different weights. So here's the thing. When we're talking about agency, if we have a relationship with somebody, we call them our client. The other name for them is a principal. Now, this is all going to be on the slides, but I just need to talk to you about this for a minute. And then everybody else Everybody else, if we're not representing you, if we're not looking after you, we call you a customer. They are like night and day in real estate. Now, folks, why is this important? Because I told you selling is a dangerous word. If you see selling, it doesn't tell you where your loyalties reside. But now let me introduce test-taking skills for agency. Dora is assisting a buyer as a selling agent. And her buyer client is interested in putting in an offer. What just happened there?
It just told you that she is the buyer's agent.
That's exactly right. Because when I said Dora is assisting the buyer as a selling agent, that tells you nothing. She's working with a buyer, that's all it tells you. But the second that the question went on to say that her buyer client, that word client is so powerful that that is her person. That now you know that she is a buyer's agent. Let me flip the coin there. Dora is assisting a buyer as a selling agent, and this buyer customer is interested in putting in an offer. Folks, who is Dora representing?
The listing agent.
And by default, the seller. It's okay. I mean, yes, they're representing the listing agent, but it's okay to just say the seller because ultimately that's the person who's in the transaction. Do you see how powerful those words are? That one word changes the outcome of a test question. Because if they're our client, we're going to look after their best interest. If they're a customer, there's certain legal things that we have to do for them, but we're not looking after their best interest. They're not our person. Does that make sense?
Now, is principal and client the same?
They are the exact same. They can be used interchangeably. Principal and client mean the exact same thing. So if I said, you know, Dora working with a buyer principal, yep, same thing as working with a buyer client. But it's still okay. Folks, if you understood what I just explained to you, you already understand 60% of agency. Not all of it, but 60%. This is one of the biggest hurdles is people don't do a good job explaining how powerful and important these words are. Now, of course, we got to go into a lot more than that, but that is a great starting point. So, let me find where I put my clicker here. I don't know where I lost it at. Probably staring right at it. Yep. That's not a big deal. So let's kick out this agency section off. Okay, I think you kind of have a good insight into this. And so we're going to talk about real estate brokerage, I mean the business of real estate, because that's another word that we introduced on day one, right? What did we say? What is not a real estate broker, but what is a broker? Who remembers?
Someone who facilitates between one party and the other.
There you go. It is a person who brings together two parties to complete some type of transaction, typically. So a stockbroker brings together people who want to sell stock options and people who want to buy them. A insurance broker brings together companies who want to issue insurance policies and people who need insurance policies. A mortgage broker is somebody who needs to borrow money, or somebody who facilitates a deal between somebody who wants to borrow money and a bank that wants to lend money. And then a real estate broker is somebody who can lawfully bring together two parties to do a real estate transaction. Buyer and seller, lessor and lessee, so on and so forth. So we're going to talk about agency. We're going to make sure you understand these relationships. We've got to get into, some more explanations of, the difference between clients and customers, what that means. We got to talk about things called fiduciary duties, our responsibilities to clients, what we owe them. A lot of things come into play here, okay? So now that I've given you kind of that basic insight into the terminology and the agency as a whole, here is kind of a visual representation of this. We've got a principal, which is also called a client, who hires an agent. And so just like I keep telling you, the agent is looking after the best interest of that client or that principal. We want what's best for them. We do. They have hired us to look after their best interest. That is the whole purpose here. And so this relationship between the principal or client and the agent is one of a fiduciary capacity. Now I'm going to explain that word some more in just a second, but that is basically dumbed down to a position of trust, position of authority, a position of, looking after somebody. And so if you're not our principal or our client, you're really nothing to us, but we will typically refer to you as a third party or a customer. Okay? A third party or a customer. And the things that we have to do for our principals or our clients are vastly different than the things we would do for a customer. But we all agree that we're going to be working with both, right? Sometimes you assist somebody that you don't work for, but it's necessary to sometimes facilitate the deal. Say it again. Somebody say something? Oh, no. Now, here's another very important thing that you have to understand, okay? You all have heard of a real estate firm before, and we talked about it a little bit on day one, about what a firm specifically is. A firm is an entity that has been created in North Carolina that has a broker's license called a firm license. And so, for all intents and purposes, just think of a firm like the names you're familiar with. Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, Century 21, Allen Tate, whatever it may be. So here's an important thing that you have to wrap your head around, and then I've got to give you some clarification on verbiage. You are going to have a lot of agency questions on the national. You're going to have a lot of agency questions on the state. And so when I say agent, your brain needs to automatically understand the agent as the firm. Not the individual person who has a broker's license. We very often in North Carolina refer to them as a licensee or just a sub-agent. Hang tight. So realistically, this is what it looks like. The client hires an agent. Well, that agent is actually the firm. Coldwell Banker is the agent. Keller Williams is the agent. Century 21 is the agent. Not the individual person. The individual person that has a broker's license is an affiliated licensee within that firm. And so they are what we call a sub-agent. Now please understand this important distinction. The word sub-agent as it stands alone quite literally is the agent of the agent. Let me go back to Tom Cruise. Can we all agree Tom Cruise has an agent? Okay. Tom Cruise's agent wants what's best for Tom Cruise, don't they? Do you think Tom Cruise's agent probably has an assistant?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Do you think that assistant also wants what's best for Tom Cruise? That's where their money's coming from, Monica. Of course they do. Okay, they may not like him, but of course they do. That's where the money comes from. So folks, that is a sub-agent. Our loyalties are in the same place. Sub-agent just means agent of the agent. And so if I work for Coldwell Banker and my best friend hires me to represent them in a purchase, well, really they've hired Coldwell Banker. But because I am affiliated with Coldwell Banker, I am a sub-agent of Coldwell Banker. Because we can all agree that a firm is just an entity, right? It's fictitious. There's nothing that an actual business can do. People do it on behalf of a business. Yes, I'm going to be the one working with my friend. But ultimately, they hired the firm, not me. But I'm a sub-agent of that firm. Everybody still okay?
Okay, so I got a quick question.
Yep.
So
as a sub-agent for the firm, whenever they sell, then everything that's listed on the document is going to be listed as the firm, not as the sub-agent, correct?
Like on the listing agreement?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to get into that some more in just a second. But yes, the relationship would be outlined as this agreement is entered into between the seller of the real property mentioned below and blank as the firm. It would actually name the firm as the agent in that agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I got a question. Now, why wouldn't a firm be considered the agency? So,
Because technically, they're a brokerage, okay? So there's a lot of these terms that are kind of like tandem and they have double meanings and you got to be very careful. But when you're dealing with this, they are it, right? Let me try to put this in a way that's not going to confuse you. It is possible, folks. It is possible to operate without a firm. It is possible. I did it for a while. I talked about this on day one. What is it called when you operate without a firm?
Sole proprietorship.
A sole proprietorship. And so the way that these relationships work, the way that these authorities work, if there is not a firm, Tim, there's a broker acting independently as a sole proprietorship, then the sole proprietor broker is the agent. But because of the hierarchical structure, whatever you want to call it, the way that these relationships are formed, when there is a firm, that firm is the agent. They are the actual ones representing. Now, this is a very important distinction because of what we're going to get into in a minute on agency and representation. So they are also could be considered the agency, but that's just a general terminology for a group of people that do represent others. When you've actually hired them, they're the agent because that's who's directly getting hired. Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, Century 21, that's who's getting hired.
I got you.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So please understand that there is a very important distinction between just sub-agent, which just literally translates to the agent of the agent, and seller sub-agent. Seller sub-agent is a very specific and very testable terminology where what we're saying is you are representing the seller as a sub-agent of the listing agent. I'm going to give you a visual of this in just a second. But let me give you a minor side note. Let's say that Tim's my buyer and I work for Coldwell Banker. Well, he actually hired Coldwell Banker. So what am I actually? I am a sub-agent of Coldwell Banker. Every single person who works at Coldwell Banker is a sub-agent of Coldwell Banker. Now I want you to think about what that means. Let's say that every single one of you in this room also worked with Coldwell Banker with me. What does that make all of you?
Sub-agent.
A sub-agent. So even though Tim hired me, but technically he hired Coldwell Banker, what does that mean that you folks also owe to Tim?
Any of us could assist him in getting what he needs as a client.
Yeah, and now realistically, in the real world, none of you are probably going to participate in it. But at the end of the day, he is technically all of your clients too. Because we're all Coldwell Banker. And Coldwell Banker wants what's best for Tim because Tim is our client. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like you're speaking in regards to like if, say what we have in our portfolio of listings, they may not like, but they may have looked at the website and see that you may have a better portfolio of listings, and so that fits their objective. And so we would work together to sell that listing or that, yeah.
So, and here's where I've got to add something to that, Josh. It doesn't even matter about the listings we have. It's just like if I'm trying to think of like another way to compare this. Well, let me just put it this way. Coldwell Banker is Tim's client. Or I'm sorry, Tim is Coldwell Banker's client, okay? They hired Tim. Folks, I want you to understand something. I'm going to be the one working with Tim. Let's say that I am Tim's best friend. Tim calls me up, says, Seth, I want to work with you. He is going to work with me. But he's technically hiring Coldwell Banker. To the extent, folks, I want you to think about this. If Coldwell Banker was to fire me, Tim stays with Coldwell Banker, not me. Because it is Coldwell Banker's client. While I am there, yes, I technically work for Coldwell Banker. I'm affiliated with them. And so whatever Coldwell Banker wants, I am also on that same ship. I want the same thing. And so it has nothing to do with who has listings. And so I just want you to picture this. Tim has never met a single one of you. But technically, every single one of you owes the same thing to Tim that I owe to Tim. Why? Because we are all Coldwell Banker.
And I guess that's because he reached out to Coldwell Banker instead of reaching out to you specifically.
No, he reached out to me specifically.
Okay.
But when you're affiliated with a firm, they're not hiring the individual licensee. They're hiring the firm, even though I'm probably the only person he will ever talk to. He has technically hired every single person in that firm, in that office. Does that make sense? You've just got to accept this as absolute truth. I know it's kind of atypical to what your brains think real estate works like, because Tim really is never going to meet any of y'all. Tim really is only going to work with me. But technically, you all still work for Tim, because y'all were all Coldwell Banker.
It's like that fiduciary trust.
There you go.
Runs across the whole firm towards me.
That's exactly right. Let's go back.
As the client.
There you go. Think about the attorneys again. They have partners. One of the partners in the attorney's office that you hire to get you out of jail, they're all want what's best for you, right? One partner's not going to go out and try to screw you over in this attorney's office. They all want what's best for you. If they've got an intern, if they got a paralegal, if they have a whole team, they all want to get you off of jail. That sounded weird. They all want to get you out of jail. Okay? Some Freudian slip is what they call that. And it's going to make more as I give you more examples, but you have to take this as absolute truth. That doesn't matter who they met, doesn't matter who they want, doesn't matter who's assisting them. Everybody within the firm works for them. You have to accept that. They hire the firm, and everybody within that firm is considered a sub-agent of Coldwell Banker, a sub-agent of Century 21, a sub-agent of whatever. What you got, Jacob?
I was just gonna say, if it doesn't make sense to somebody, it's really easy if you think about it, kind of in the terms of other businesses as well, right? Like you were talking about, a barber earlier. If you think about it, you might go get your hair cut by Logan every single time, but you're still going to the
barber shop,
actual barber shop, and so you're a loyal customer to Logan, yeah, but you're also a customer. But what you really are is a customer to David's barbershop or whatever it is, because and also at the end of the day, you don't pay Ben. I know that's
no. This is actually a really good comparison.
But you don't pay Logan. You pay the barbershop, and the barbershop pays Logan his commission.
There you go.
And so it's kind of the same thing, right? And anybody else in the barbershop is going to be happy to get you a water bottle or whatever.
Sure. And there are going to be times that you may go in there and Logan's not there and you say, okay, Sam can cut my hair. You were still taken care of by that same barber shop. It was just another representative. And so, Jacob, to that fantastic analogy, that does happen sometimes. Think about it. If Tim's working with me, what happens if I get hit by a bus? Jacob's going to step in and Jacob's going to help Tim buy a house. Because he still has a relationship. Now, this is going to be, you think I'm joking about the bus. I'm actually going to use that bus thing a lot because there's a lot of very important testable concepts that you have to understand about relationships and how they end and how they don't. But that's exactly right. So by default, if I say the agent, your brain by default needs to go to what?
Firm.
The firm. But if I change it and I say hired a sole practitioner, or a sole proprietor or an individual licensee. That changes things. It is possible to hire a person. Remember on day 1 and day 2 when we talked about firm versus sole proprietor? Sometimes you don't know how many or how few, but if we tell you that you hired one sole practitioner operating independently, well, that's the only person. But if there's a sole proprietorship with a lot of people, there's no firm, but their brokerage, the company, would still be the agent. And I'm going to give you some more examples, and we're going to dive deeper into this. But in this instance where Tim's a buyer, what we all technically are is buyer subagents. But I promise you the term buyer subagent is not testable. The term seller subagent, though, is absolutely testable. And then the word subagent by itself is just agent of the agent. Doesn't matter who it is, it's just an agent representing an agent. And I'm going to give you a lot more insight into this. So let's look at these pieces of verbiage that I'm throwing at you, okay? Here's agency, like Tim said. Agency is not referred to so much as the firm, it's the relationship, right? We have an agency relationship. That's the general context of the use of the word agency. And so when Tim hired me, more specifically Coldwell Banker, we have what's called an agency relationship. Okay, an agency relationship. So it's a relationship that exists when somebody is authorized to act on behalf of another person. Well, the person that authorizes this relationship, the person that hires somebody, because it does require hiring somebody, I told you is referred to as the principal or the client. Those are interchangeable. They always will be. Principal or client. So that is the person that the agent is looking after, the person the agent is representing. And then the agent is the person who's working for that client. Okay, working for that principal. And the default is the firm. The firm is the agent, and we as licensees, we work for the firm. Now, here's a word of caution. In North Carolina, we use these terms very, very much, okay? Firm, brokerage, company. If I say firm in North Carolina, that is a licensed entity. If I say brokerage or company, could be a sole proprietorship, could be a licensed entity. Those are interchangeable. But the problem is on the national side, they use slightly different verbiage than us. You may not see them talk about a firm. You may just see them refer to broker. On the national side, broker is the person who's kind of like the head honcho. They may not call it a firm over there. So they may just say, Tim hired a broker. Well, that broker will have affiliated licensees. And so it's the same concept, right? Everybody within that broker, it's just a nuance. And we'll get into some more information on this in just a second. So real estate brokers work for brokerage firms. Firms work for clients and principals. So as I said, subagent quite literally translates to agent of the agent. And so when they hire Coldwell Banker, every single person affiliated with Coldwell Banker is a subagent of Coldwell Banker. If they hire Century 21, every single person affiliated with Century 21 is a subagent of Century 21. Now I use this word fiduciary. It's a funny word, but a fiduciary is a person in a position of trust or in a relationship of trust. Folks, other fiduciaries, guardians, attorneys, conservators, executors, financial advisors, we are on a pedestal. When I say fiduciary, we are looking after you like you are our best friend, our mama, our brother, our sister, somebody important to us. We are looking after you. And then I told you a customer, we don't care. Anybody who's a customer, we don't care. Okay? You have to understand there are certain things that we legally owe to customers, but when I say that, it's actually kind of laughable. Because at the end of the day, I want you to think of it this way. We're going for blood to help our clients against anybody else who stands in the way. So if you're not our person, we're against you. So in a real estate transaction, if I'm the buyer's agent, where are my loyalties? The buyer. And so what does that make the seller?
Basically, your
Customer.
A customer. If I'm the seller's agent, my loyalties are where?
the seller.
The seller. What does that make the buyer?
Customer.
A customer. And so understand that that's a pretty obvious dynamic, but please be aware that anybody that we may come in contact with in a real estate transaction could be considered a customer. Home inspectors could be customers. Attorneys could be customers. Lenders could be customers. Everybody that's not our client that we may come in contact with, we can call them a customer. They're not the person who hired us. They're not the person we're representing. But we may be working with them. We may be talking to them. We may be doing stuff for them. But it's still okay. Don't worry, there's layers. We will continue to build up on it. Jacob says, great, other than the fact you can't breathe. Yeah, you know, that whole like getting sick thing is, that's a pain. That's no bueno.
Dude, I feel like my sinuses got punched in the face by a bus.
That's how I was that one night, and then mine got better. I mean, that pressure is just no joke with this stuff going around. I mean, it's just really crazy. Yeah.
I know, it's giving me a headache that's making it difficult to focus, so I'm fighting here.
There you go. Well, at least you're here, because this is very important stuff. So, that being said, folks, 7:13. I'll give you a couple extra minutes. Go take a break, and we will keep on keeping on with these fun-filled agency discussions. So, let me introduce another thing that you need to keep your mind on to differentiate between nationally and on a state level. When you look right here and you see this word fiduciary, yeah, I told you it is a position of trust. It is where we are looking after somebody's best interest. And so it is important to note that North Carolina only practices fiduciary brokerage. Meaning you have to represent somebody in North Carolina in a fiduciary capacity. And folks, there is only a couple of people it can be from a real estate point of view. You could represent the buyer in a fiduciary capacity. Well, if you're not representing the buyer, who's the only other person you could represent? The seller.
The seller.
So, ironically enough, there are three options. You're representing the buyer only, the seller only, or you're representing both. And we're going to get into both more in a little bit. That's called dual agency. There you go. A lot of y'all have heard that terminology before. That's called dual agency. But here's the distinction between North Carolina and some states. You have to have a person in North Carolina. Because if you're not representing the buyer or the seller or both, you're not in it. You're representing nobody, and you can't participate in North Carolina. In some states, they have what we call a facilitating broker, also known as a transactional broker. And so it is a person who may assist in getting something to closing, but they don't care about anybody. There's no actual agency relationship. So some states, this would basically be like a paper pusher, right? Here's some paperwork for you, buyer. Here's some paperwork for you, seller. What do y'all want to do? Let's get this to closing. We don't care about them, but we're getting it to where it needs to be. It's called a facilitator or a transactional broker. Now, this very well can be on your test. both on the national and the state, because you could have a question like, which of the following is not an option in the state of North Carolina? Facilitating or transactional brokerage, because we only practice fiduciary brokerage. Or you could see it on a state level, right? Which of the following would be, a type of transaction where a broker may assist but not represent the parties to get it to come to fruition? A facilitating or transactional broker. So there are still, of course, obligations that come into play here within disclosure laws, because I told you, even customers in North Carolina, even though we don't care about them, even though we don't have a relationship with them, there are certain things that we still legally owe them. So same thing here. While they may not care about the outcome of these parties, they may still owe them require disclosures like material facts disclosure in that respective state. Okay? It's called a facilitating or transactional broker. We don't do this in North Carolina. Got to have a person. So when we go further into North Carolina and fiduciary brokerage, and a lot of states do fiduciary brokerage, we're not the only ones. It's just that, some states do this thing as well. So a fiduciary is bound to act primarily for the benefit of their person. Folks, even above your own self-interests. You are looking out for that person more than you're looking after yourself. This is a very important, testable concept, but sometimes it is a hard pill to swallow. I'm going to leave it at that for now, but I'm going to reintroduce what I mean by even before your own self-interest in just a moment. So we're talking about agency. You have this understanding now that an agent is just somebody representing somebody else. It doesn't have to be real estate. Well, understand that when you give somebody the authority to act on your behalf, there are different, what I would like to call, tiers of authority, sometimes referred to as power levels. To what extent can you do things on behalf of somebody? Okay, to what extent? And let me give you an example here. Folks, let's say that you wanted to go buy a house today and you hired a real estate agent to represent you. Do you want your buyer's agent to have the power to offer whatever they think you should offer for a house without consulting you? Do you want to give them a blank check? No.
Wait, say that again?
I said, if you were going out to buy a house right now and you hired an agent to help you, do you want to give them full authority to offer whatever they think you should offer without consulting you? To give you a blank check? Or to give them a blank check? No. Same thing too. If you want to go sell your house right now and you hired a real estate agent, do you want that real estate agent to be able to sell your house without consulting you on what amount, what terms, what anything?
No.
There you go. Wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, would it?
No.
So there are different levels of authority that somebody may be granted acting as an agent on behalf of a principal or client. So let's start with the most powerful one, folks. There is a terminology that we refer to as a universal agent. Folks, how big is the universe?
Infinite.
Huge, infinite, never ending. Whatever you'd like to call it. And just like the universe is huge and infinite and never ending, so are the powers of a universal agent. So if somebody was given this level of authority, they could do anything and everything on behalf of a person. Now, a lot of people, when I introduce this, they're like, oh, like a power of attorney. Nuh-uh. Here's the thing. There are over 22 different types of power of attorney. This is a type. It's called an unlimited power of attorney. If you give somebody this authority, they could open accounts in your name. They could close your bank accounts. They could open businesses in your name. They could close them. They could sell your house. They could pull the plug on you. They can do anything and everything on behalf of you. Now, folks, does this sound like a level of power we would need as a real estate agent?
No.
No. But remember, you're not only going to be tested on real estate. You're going to be tested on agency in general. So you've got to know this. So this is not uncommon for like a military spouse. Because if your spouse is overseas in Iraq, and you need to be able to buy and sell real estate and open and close bank accounts and get your kids vaccinated and do all these things, you may have your spouse sign an unlimited power of an attorney over to you, which gives you authority to do everything and anything on behalf of them, okay? Universal agent, unlimited power. They can do everything on behalf of a person, not really dealing with it. We don't really do that with this much in real estate. Now, from not us point of view, I've dealt with this in real estate because I had a client whose husband had dementia. And so she was, over all of his stuff. So she had the authority to do all of the things on behalf of him as his guardian. So let's take it a step down, okay? The next step down is what we call a general agent, okay? General agent. And a general agent is one that has the authorities to do certain very specific things on behalf of their client. So they can't open your bank accounts, they can't close your bank accounts, they can't reinvest your profits, they can't pull the plug on you, but you have given them authority to do very specific things on behalf of you. And so one of the most common and testable examples of this is probably acting as a property manager. Now, folks, before I go any further, let me give you a little bit of a pop quiz, because relationships matter. If I say property manager, there is an agency relationship. Who are the parties to a property management agency relationship?
Landlord, client, and the property manager.
Should only be two parties. So are you saying landlord client is one?
It's the client and the property management company.
Okay. So let me just make sure that we're all on the same page. Who is the client though? Who are they?
The homeowner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Stephanie said, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Folks, the landlord, the homeowner, is the client. The property manager brokerage firm would be the agent. Everybody okay with that? When we're dealing with these relationships, it is very important to understand who the parties to a relationship are. When we get into contracts, it'll be very important to understand who the parties to a contract are. The deed, who are the parties to a deed. It's always very important to understand the relationships and who the parties are. So in property management, they would have this relationship formed by way of a property management agreement. And it would outline all the duties and responsibilities between the property owner, the landlord, and the property manager, brokerage company. And very commonly, they will be granted certain powers that let them act as a general agent. A lot of times the property manager would have the ability to sign leases on behalf of the owner, to order repairs on behalf of the owner, to do very limited capacity things that bind them to that agreement without having to go and ask them for permission each time. That is a general agent. You can sign on behalf of them in very limited things. Now, I'm going to circle back around because this is where I can tie something in full circle. I told you when I say the word agent, your brain needs to go where?
The firm.
The firm. So if I say a listing agreement, who are the parties to a listing agreement?
Seller and the client.
No, it's seller and the agent.
And who's the agent?
The firm.
The seller and the real estate firm representing the seller, okay, as their agent. Now I want you to think about this. On this listing agreement, because it is a type of a contract, and we're going to talk more about contracts, we need signatures. Well, whose signatures do we need?
The sellers.
You need the sellers and the sub-agent.
The sellers and the sub-agent. And you're exactly right, Jacob. Folks, understand this. Yes, the firm is the agent, but a firm can't sign anything, can they? So who's signing it? We are, as the sub-agent of the firm. In that example earlier where I used Tim as the buyer, Cole Banker was the agent, and I was a sub-agent, I would have signed the buyer agency agreement with Tim as the buyer. Well, in a listing agreement, if I'm representing, let's say Tim's the seller now the agreement's between Tim, the seller, and Cole Banker, the firm, but I'm going to sign it on behalf of my firm. Folks, if I have the power to bind my firm to agreements like that, that makes me a general agent. I didn't have to go and get permission. I've been given that authority. When I joined the firm, I was given the authority to bind them to these agency agreements. So a property manager is very often acting as a general agent, and a real estate broker affiliated with a firm is acting as a general agent of their firm. Can we all agree that I can't go out and close Cole Banker's bank accounts, can I? No. But they've given me enough authority to do a very limited thing, like enter into agency agreements on behalf of them. Everybody with me? So that's the middle of the ground power that you may have as an agent, called general agent. Well, let's go to the lowest piece of this totem pole, folks. The lowest piece is called a special agent. Folks, a special agent. You are the James Bond, the 007 of real estate. You are a special agent. All right? However, you need to remember this. A special agent is really and truthfully an advisor. I'm going to give you my knowledge. I'm going to give you my guidance. I'm going to give you my skill set. But ultimately, who makes the decisions? The client. That's it. So when you're working with buyers and sellers as a real estate agent, you are acting in the authority of a special agent. Because when I get an offer for my seller, what am I going to do? An offer comes in, I have it. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to present it to them. I'm going to say, do you like this? Do you want to take this? And they say, well, I don't know. Should I? And I'm going to tell them the pros and cons, but we're not accepting it unless they say what? I accept it. So when we're working with buyers and sellers, we're a special agent. We're going to give you our guidance. We're going to give you our advice. We're going to, but ultimately, we can't make decisions without you. You're the decision maker.
So typically, when you are the listing agent, you are going to be a general agent, and when you are
no,
well, no, I guess that's not true. It's for each the different things. So you'd be a general agent in terms of your
firm, while simultaneously being a listing agent on behalf of, or a special agent on behalf of the seller.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. And understand that these things are, they can happen in tandem. And so if we've got a buyer agency agreement, like you said, we're going to enter into that as a general agent of our firm. But in regard to that relationship with that buyer, we're only a special agent. So don't think of these as like different from buyer's agent. It's just what tiers of authority that you would have in these other actual representations, these other actual agency relationships. How much could you do in those relationships? So I've already kind of alluded to this, and you're already kind of piecing it together. And so let's just play the game with all of these, all right? The way that we create these relationships is with agency agreements. That's where somebody hires us. We can't act on behalf of you unless you say you want us to. Folks, we can all agree that you can't walk up to somebody and be like, I'm your agent. It'd be like that movie with the guy's like, I'm the captain now, right? You can't do that and like walk and be like, I'm your buyer's agent now. It doesn't work that way. So somebody has to hire us, and they do that by way of agency agreements. Now, on this list is different types of agency agreements. And I want us to name the parties, folks. Let's just say it again. In a listing agreement, who are the parties?
Seller.
The agent and seller.
Units comic strip debuts back in 19.
Seller agent.
Inspectors were just going about their daily.
The seller and the firm as the agent, right? What about a buyer agency agreement? Who are the parties?
The buyer and the agent.
And the firm as the agent. Well, dual agency is a very interesting concept. So I'm going to hold off on that one. And we're going to circle back around to it because I don't want to confuse you just yet. Property management agreement. We just said this. Who are the parties?
It will be the listing agent, the property manager, and then
No, there's no listing agent. Listing means it's for sale.
will be the agent
The
or the broker.
yeah.
Property management firm and the homeowner.
There you go. The owner of real property and the agent, which is the property management broker or brokerage firm or whatever it may be. Okay? So, folks, let me just throw in a curveball here. Well, property management is where you take somebody's house and you market it and you fulfill whatever needs. Typically, you're renting it out. So, what does that make a tenant?
Customer.
Customer. Gotta be very careful, right? The tenant is a customer because as the broker, as a property manager, right, our client is the homeowner. So who might we interact with on a day-to-day basis? It's not our person, the tenant, their customer. So in-house brokerage employment contracts called an independent contractor's agreement. Remember, you are an independent contractor, okay? Most of the time as a real estate broker, you're self-employed. You are not an employee. And so you get hired as an independent contractor, as an affiliated licensee, and you would sign this agreement, which would basically typically give you the authority to act as a general agent of your brokerage firm. And then cooperation agreements, I'll give you some different examples. Cooperating is just agreeing to work with somebody else. And we do that typically by way of the MLS and other miscellaneous property management, not property management agreements, cooperation agreements. So I'll circle back around to that one too. Now, we're going to get into more detail on this in a little bit, but I want you to understand something about agency agreements. And this is important. When you hire an agent by way of an agency agreement, at the moment of its inception, they're your agent, you're their client. Well, folks, it doesn't exist forever because they're typically hiring us to do something very specific. So agency relationships can and do end. Now, this is a little bit ironic because, of course, you probably all realize that as a real estate broker, we want to maintain relationships with our clients for life so that we can help them in the future, so we can help their friends. But don't worry about that. For the sake of your test, when the relationship's done, when it's ended, that client turns into a what?
A customer.
A customer. Because if we are not in this agency relationship with you right now, everybody who's not a client is a customer. And so one of the most common ways that an agency agreement ends is fulfillment of purpose. Well, if Jacob hired me to help him buy a house and he buys a house, folks, it's done. Jacob's not a client anymore. I'm going to reach out to him. I'm going to check on him, but technically, legally speaking, he's a customer. If Justin hires me to sell his house and I sell it, we're done. I'm not his listing agent anymore. If I leave a real estate firm, our independent contractor agreement is done. So there's a lot of different ways that these end. Now, one of the other ways that this can end is expiration of terms. And so when we're dealing with this is where I'm going to point out one of the North Carolina things. And it kind of bleeds over, but I'll tell you why it's also North Carolina. Listing agreements, agency agreements in general, have to have an end date. They have to. They cannot be automatically renewing under most circumstances. They can't go on forever and ever. They have to have an end date. And in North Carolina, we specifically outline that in License Law and Commission rules, which is why it's going to be very testable in North Carolina side as well. There are 4 things in North Carolina required by rule that every written agency agreement has to have. An end date is one of them. And so it's basically like a self-destruct thing. Let's freaking Tom Cruise again. Mission Impossible, right? When he gets those glasses, when the time runs out, it just blows up. It's dead. So if we have not fulfilled the purpose and the date and time hit that we put on the agency agreement, our relationship's dead. Now, can we extend that agreement? Sure. Could we draft up a new one? Sure. But without that happening, you would turn back into a customer. So this blue one, mutual agreement, okay, this is a very important concept. Folks, mutual agreement will end every type of contract. I'm going to say that again. Mutual agreement will end every type of contract. Understand that these agency agreements are a type of contract. And so the reason why this is so important, folks, without us even getting into the contract section yet, what is the point of a contract?
To bind all parties involved.
To bind all parties involved. That's exactly right. That's very well said. So I want you to think about this. Corey hires me to sell his house, and he gives me 6 months to do it. That's the expiration date, 6 months from its inception date. And 4 months later, Corey says, Seth, I hate your guts. I want out. And I look at Corey and I say, tough cookies. Ain't nothing he can do about it. Because it is a contract. That contract promised me that he would give me 6 months to sell his house. You cannot just get out of a contract because I don't want to anymore. I don't like your face. That's not an allowable reason to get out of a contract. This is very important to understand, folks. Here's another very important testable lesson. You're going to have questions that as a person you don't like. But don't answer them whether you like them or not, because think about it. I want you to think about it right now. I'm the only real estate agent in this room. And so if you hired me and you hated my guts, every single one of you, and you wanted to get out of it, and I looked at you in the face and I said, nope, sucks to suck, Chuck. You got to keep working with me for 3 more months. Do you like that? Does that feel good?
No.
Makes you angry, doesn't it? But you cannot answer a question based on, well, I don't like that. You'll get it wrong. Because a contract is a contract is a contract. Now, if Corey and I agreed that we didn't want to work together anymore, if Corey says, I want out, and I said, Corey, no problem, let's do it. That is mutual agreement. That's a difference, isn't it? Mutual agreement will terminate every contract in the world. If the parties agree to terminate it, whether it be seller and listing firm, whether it be buyer and seller, whether it be property owner and property manager, every agency agreement, every contract in the world will end with mutual agreement. If both parties agree, we can kill it. Very important.
I have a question.
Let me get Jacob first because he has his hand up, and then I'll get you, Stephanie.
So if you were going to, okay, so say.
Nope, you muted back. You muted back. You muted back. There you go.
Say Corey was my agent. I didn't like him. I didn't want to work with him or whatever. I know that I can't end my contract with him, but can I be in a contract with another person at the same time? Can I also hire Stephanie, and it's just whoever sells my house first gets the commission?
Hang tight. It is possible, but it depends on what type of contract you signed. We're going to get into that. It's a very good question. Now, let me actually add one level to this, Jacob. Think about it. Corey hates my guts. I work for Coldwell Banker. In theory, Coldwell Banker could just remove me and reassign somebody else within Coldwell Banker, and the contract hasn't changed because everybody within Coldwell Banker is Coldwell Banker. So Corey's contract is still being fulfilled. Maybe he just hates my guts. But I'm going to give you some different examples, so that's a very good question, and I'll answer it. What you got, Stephanie?
Okay, so the mutual agreement to part ways, does it have to be in writing or can it be just an oral agreement?
So this is one of those adult diaper scenarios, folks, right? It depends. If on the test they indicate that there is mutual agreement, they're not trying to trick you, it will terminate the contract. Does it typically happen in writing? Yeah. So there would be, a termination by way of mutual agreement form for most contracts. Now, you're just going to have to read into the context of the question. Because like I said, if it says, Corey and Seth mutually agreed to end their, seller-client relationship or seller-agent relationship, is it ended? Yes. They're not trying to trick you because not everything has to be in writing. Remember when we were talking about the statute of frauds, only certain things have to be in writing to be enforceable in a court of law. Is it a good idea to have everything in writing? Sure. Doesn't necessarily legally have to be, though. So it's going to depend on the context of the question. So let's change things a little bit. Corey didn't like my face. Well, folks, I never made a promise to Corey that he had to like my face. But what I did probably make to Corey is some promises on selling his house. So if I'm in breach of my promises, if I'm not doing, breach means I'm not doing what I said I was going to do. If he can prove that, you can get out of a contract. If somebody is not legally doing what they promised to do, that's called a breach. And that typically gives the non-breaching party an out. So there's a big difference between I don't like you anymore and you're failing in your duties as you promised them to me. And then the last one is operation of law. Now, folks, this is where I'm going to go ahead and teach you a very in-depth version of this. Okay, I'm going to start giving you some different examples, but you have to understand that these are very testable, number one. So let me give you an operation of, an example of operation of law. Folks, when we talked about involuntary alienation, we talked about eminent domain. What was eminent domain?
When the state comes in and just takes your land.
Yeah, the government's right to take your property. Now, they do have to pay you for it, right? But they can force the sale of it, and they can take it for public use, the greater good. So let's say that Corey was the seller, again, and I was his agent. Really, realistically, Cole Banker is, but I, am the sub-agent, and I'm working directly with him. Well, folks, if in the midst of me marketing Corey's house for sale and trying to sell it, the government comes in and says, yoink, that would kill my listing agreement. Because if the government, in their right, took the property, I ain't got nothing to sell no more. Does that make sense for everybody? A house being taken or in bankruptcy protection that doesn't allow it to be sold, a court hearing that, takes it, a court-ordered sale, anything like that could kill an agency agreement. So let me take this a step further, okay? There are other types of ways that an agency agreement can end, but it would really depend on the agency agreement. So I told you condemnation, where the government takes it, would kill it. But destruction of the property would kill a listing agreement. And destruction of the property would kill a property management agreement. I'm going to backtrack here for a second. We're going to go back to this slide. I want to just talk you through this before you read too much onto that page. Think about this. Misty has a house to sell, and I sign a listing agreement with Misty. And the day after I sign that listing agreement with Misty, her house catches on fire and burns to the ground. Folks, my listing agreement is dead, because what did it say? It said that I was going to endeavor to sell Misty's house at 172 Walnut Street. Well, it doesn't exist anymore.
Seth, you do realize my sister's house caught fire last week, right?
I forgot about that, Misty. That was not intentional.
Take it back.
I take it back. I'm sorry. It happened to I don't want to do that to anybody. I just feel weird. Thanks, Misty. Lord, my house burns down. Okay, Misty, you're my agent. My house burned down. All right, like whatever it be. But understand, folks, it's very important to understand this, because a listing agreement is property specific. You were hired to sell a specific piece of property. A property management agreement is property specific. You were hired to manage a very specific piece of property. So destruction of that property would kill that property management agreement. Does that make sense? But from a buyer agency point of view, that's not the case. Think about it. What if I was helping Adriana buy a house? Okay, I had a buyer agency agreement with Adriana. And we get under contract on 123 Main Street. And while we're under contract on 123 Main Street, the house burns down. Adriana was endeavoring to buy this house understand that might kill our sales contract. Well, who's the parties to the sales contract?
The buyer and the seller.
The buyer and the seller. The buyer and the seller. The sales contract is the seller and the buyer. And so that might kill Adriana's agreement with the seller to buy that property. But what's not dead is mine and Adriana's buyer agency agreement. Because it was never property specific. You're going to see that when we start looking at it. It was just I'll help you find a property similar to this in similar areas to whatever you told me you're looking for. Does that make sense for everybody? What you got, Adriana?
What if you leave the farm? So do I follow you to this other farm?
No.
Or
who is your agent?
It's the firm.
It's the firm. So if I leave, where are you staying?
So I stay with the firm.
With the firm.
Even though if we sign a contract that I'm buying a house with your help, but then 3 months after the beginning, you leave. So I will be assigned a new agent.
That's exactly right.
But what if I don't want to? What if I wanted to buy with you?
Sucks to suck.
I cannot do.
You signed a contract stating that you hired Coldwell Banker, and that Seth would probably be the one helping you, but realistically, anybody with Coldwell Banker could be helping you.
Okay.
Yep.
But could you just wait out the contract then and just not worry about buying until the contract was over and then go back and sign with whoever you were working with?
Part of the contract is that you are going to cooperate and endeavor to do what you said you were going to do. If you just sit there and start twiddling your thumbs, I could argue you're in breach.
Fair.
At which point the contract would just end, though, right?
No, breach typically, sometimes breach is accompanied by what we call remedies, punishments for your breach. Yeah, we can end it, but it's typically being ended with punishments or penalties.
Okay, so that leads me back to my question, my first question.
Yep.
Right? So say, right, Seth, you worked with Coldwell Bankers, whatever, you quit, now you work with another firm. And I still have a contract with the first firm, but I really want to buy a house with you.
Mm-hmm.
I go under contract with another firm and just see like which way it goes, or no?
So let me give you the short answer, because obviously this is very similar to the question you asked, and we're going to get there, but here's the thing. There is something called an exclusive agency agreement. And if you have signed an exclusive agency agreement, that means the one and only. You can't have anybody else. So if you enter into an agreement with somebody else, you're in breach of contract, and there's probably going to be penalties. It's kind of like, Jacob, you've talked about your girlfriend before. I'm assuming you and your girlfriend are in an exclusive relationship. If you go home with another girl tonight, what's going to happen to you, Jacob?
He's gonna die.
I'll be dead.
You are going to be reading his obituary tomorrow, okay? This young feller had his whole life ahead of him and made a mistake and went home with somebody else, and this woman poisoned him in his, whatever it may be. So it depends on the agreement. If you didn't sign an exclusive agreement, sure, you go nuts. But if it's exclusive, sucks to suck, Chuck. You're in it with just the two of us. Yeah.
For my, not for the test, but for my own curiosity, what is typically, like, what do you see as kind of standard?
The exclusive.
Kind of contract.
Exclusive, yep. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk all about these in just a second. Now, folks, let me paint a picture for you, okay? And let me reiterate. I'm going to ask it one more again, okay? I'm going to ask it one more again because it's very important. When I say agent, you think what?
Firm.
Firm. Okay, so here's a scenario for you, okay? I'm going to explain something. Agency agreements, very specifically agency agreements, not all contracts. Agency agreements would end with death of the parties. So if I sign a listing agreement with Manoj, okay, and so I am listing Manoj's house for sale, and here's what happens. Ready for this? Manoj walks outside one morning to grab his newspaper, and he's drinking his coffee, and he picks up his newspaper. He's just standing on his front porch, and he sees something in the sky, and he's looking up there. He's like, "What is that? That thing's moving fast. Is that an airplane? No, what is that?" And it's getting faster, and it's getting bigger. It's getting faster, it's getting bigger. And he's really just trying to figure out what this is. And before you know it, Manoj just got flattened by a meteorite, okay? What a really weird and crazy way to die, okay? I didn't want to bring the house fire back into this. So Manoj just got flattened by a meteorite. He is a Manoj pancake. He is dead with a capital D, folks. Ugh. My listing agreement is dead because one of the parties died. Manoj can no longer endeavor to sell his house anymore. Now, please understand something. My listing agreement is dead. If he had a sales contract already in place, that's a whole different story. I'm going to make a very powerful statement here. Listen to me. Agency contracts die with the death of the parties. Sales contracts survive death. That is very important to understand. Now, don't ask me any questions about the sales contract because I don't want to confuse the topics. I just needed to make that distinction. So let me take this a step further. Let me backtrack, okay? Let's bring Manoj back to life. Manoj is standing on his porch. He's looking at that meteor. It has no idea what it is. And instead of going for him, goes this way. And it hits me. And it flattens me into a Seth pancake. Does that kill mine and Manoj's listing agreement?
No.
Why?
Because you are the sub.
The sub-agent of Coldwell Banker. Coldwell Banker was the agent. Folks, is Coldwell Banker still alive?
Yep.
Yes. So his agency agreement is still alive. Death of the parties, but the party didn't die on that side. One of the agents did, but Coldwell Banker's alive and well. So you know what the phone call is going to go like? Because y'all asked such a good question a little bit ago. The broker in charge in North Carolina, they're going to pick up the phone. They're going to call Manoj. Oh my goodness, Manoj. Hey, listen, I'm the broker in charge of this Coldwell Banker office. Oh my goodness. I don't know if you saw on the news yet, but listen, Seth was flattened by a meteorite. Oh my God, it was such a sight. Poor guy, we've already called his family. Listen, Manoj, we're going to reassign Sam to take over your listing, okay? And don't worry, the open house that Seth was going to hold on Saturday, it's still happening. Sam's going to do it. And by the way, Manoj, if you liked Seth, his services are going to be on Sunday. Hey, listen, have a great day. Click. Because Coldwell Banker is alive and well. Manoj is alive and well. So death of the parties does kill it, but the party didn't die. Now what would change though is if Manoj had hired Seth, the sole practitioner, the sole proprietor. It was just me. If he hired just me, my death would kill the agency agreement because there is no one else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Now, let me take this one more step further. Folks, a firm can dissolve. If the firm went bankrupt and closed its doors, that would kill the agency agreement. If the firm lost its BIC and couldn't operate legally or lawful anymore, that would basically be the death of the parties, and that would kill the agency agreement. If the firm dissolved its entity with the Secretary of State, right? It is possible for the firm to die, but one licensee, one sub-agent dying does not kill the firm. That is a very, very important distinction to make. Because you will get questions on the test, especially on the North Carolina side. Say exactly this, right? Josh is the listing agent working on behalf of ABC Realty. 3 weeks into the transaction, Josh is incapacitated or leaves the firm. What is the status of the listing agreement with blah, 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 blah? And you would have to be able to follow this train of thought to say, okay, the listing agreement is still alive because the firm's fine. Or, oh no, the listing agreement died because it was Josh the sole practitioner. Whatever it may be. Very testable stuff here.
What if somebody, is in a situation where they are going to buy a house, they are under contract, not under contract with a home, but under contract with an agency, and they decide, you know what, never mind, I think I like my house, I don't want to move.
Hang tight on that, because that's going to be another very testable concept, folks. There's those situations, because it's a very good question. Does that kind of stuff happen in the real world? Yes, but you have to be able to answer it from a legal point of view. What is set to happen? What lawfully can happen? What lawfully will happen? Because understand, Jacob, in that scenario in the real world, if I'm working with a buyer and they say, I changed my mind, I'm probably just going to let them out of it. I'm going to say, okay, well, no harm, no foul. Call me when you're ready. But that's not ever going to be the answer on the test. Once again, the question is going to be, well, are you in breach? And if you are, you may still owe me money for wasting my time because maybe I did my job regardless of whether you changed your mind or not. And we're going to get into that some more when we get to the actual agency contracts. We're going to look at them, and I'm going to show you the most testable provisions within these agency agreements. So, got to be able to follow this, okay? Death of the parties would kill an agency agreement. Destruction of the property would only kill very specific agency agreements. Listing and property management, because they are property specific. Termination, fulfillment of purpose, breach of the contract, mutual agreement, all these things would kill an agency agreement. Now let me make sure you're following along with me here. Quick little question. True or false, general agency is the most common in residential real estate sales transactions.
True.
True.
False.
No, you said special.
There you go. False. Special agency is the most common. Most people are going to get into working with buyers and sellers. When you are working with buyers and sellers, you are a special agent. You cannot bind them to anything. General agency is common with property management, which is not the most common form of what people get into. It is a thing, but... So I've already kind of explained a few different concepts to you. I told you, in general, you default to thinking the firm. But as I mentioned, it is possible to hire an individual broker. There is those times that you could operate independently. And we talked a little bit about this on day one, especially on the North Carolina side of things, because the full broker potentially could operate independently. And then a full broker who then becomes a broker in charge as a sole proprietor can do everything a firm can do, even though they were just one person. And so that's going to change the question greatly. Because if there's only one person, well, let me point this out to you. If there's only one person, that means a couple things absolutely. It means death of that one person would kill an agency agreement because there's nobody else. It also means that certain types of agency can't exist. So we're going to talk about dual agency in a moment, and dual agency is this very unique concept. There's also a very specialized type of it called designated. Well, folks, if there's one person, it's impossible to do designated. So sometimes you will find that the numbers change the question. Because you could have a one-person brokerage firm, you could have a two-person brokerage firm, you could have a 1,000-person brokerage firm. You could have a one-person sole proprietor, or you could have a sole proprietorship with multiple people. And the numbers do matter for certain types of questions, certain contexts of questions. Now, there's really no perfect way to teach these several sections that are coming up, right? We're talking about agency, then we're going to get into agency agreements, then we're going to get into basic contract law, and then we're going to get into sales contracts. And no matter which way you slice it, there is always going to be a case of, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Because I'm going to be introducing words that you haven't really heard yet, so you're going to get these mini lessons on them, and then of course I'll give you the more in-depth version of them as they, come into play in the later sections. So here's some of those words that I'm talking about. Express is a word that means stated. Not like Panda Express where you get fast Chinese food, okay? It's not that type of express. It's like when you say, let me express how angry I am. Let me express how disappointed I am. It's to tell you, to state. This is a very important word under basic contract law. Folks, express does not mean in writing. Writing is a type of express, but to tell somebody, to state it verbally, orally, is still express. And so agency agreements very often are express, clearly stated. Now, this is an important note. Every agency agreement in North Carolina has to be express. Every single one has to be stated in some way, shape, or form. We do not allow implied agreements, okay? Remember when I was giving you the scenario where I believe Eliza jumped in the car with me and we went and we looked at, a bunch of houses? Well, my actions probably suggested to Eliza that we were in an agency relationship. That would be an implied agreement. If you start showing people houses and you start talking to them about what would be a good idea or best interest or whatever, that would be an implied agreement. Your actions suggest that you're representing them and they take it as such. Now, we do not have these types of relationships in North Carolina. All of ours have to be stated. Any implied agreements are illegal. That doesn't mean that they're illegal in every state. Some states would absolutely accept them as a relationship is formed and somebody maybe do some money or something else. But don't get too caught up on it. Implied just means our actions suggested this relationship existed, but we never stated that we had this relationship. Now, apparent authority by performing any act that accepts the conduct of the agent as that of an agent. So there are a lot of national concepts that get very rabbit holey with this, with like apparent authority. And so let me just try my best way to articulate this, okay? If you were to call up your agent or somebody and say, hey, listen, I'm going out of town for a couple of weeks. If you would let my dog out a couple times each day while I'm gone. And that's all you said. Well, I go and I let your dog out. You never clearly stated that I was allowed to go into your house. But I had the authority to do so because you said go let my dog out, which implied that I was able to open your door, and you didn't stop me. And so I have this apparent authority to go out and do these things on behalf of you. You just accept that this conduct is a part of it because of some task or some type of relationship. Now, I wouldn't get too worried or too rabbit hole on these. There's a lot of things that come into play, like agency by estoppel and stuff. I'm not going to go into those right now. I'll mention those later because they get very confusing and they're not crazy testable for all intents and purposes. Now, we already answered the other piece on this as well. Compensation does not determine agency. It doesn't matter where the money comes from. It matters what kind of agency agreement you have. So I could be representing the buyer by way of a buyer agency agreement, but be paid by the seller. I could be representing a buyer and be paid by the buyer. I could be representing the buyer and be paid by the listing firm. Doesn't matter where the money's coming from. What matters is the relationships we formed. It's very weird in that regard, right? Because like no other industry does that. We're like, yeah, I don't know where the money's coming from, but I'm looking after you, even though it's not the person paying me. So let's take this a little bit further, okay? I told you that when you are representing somebody, you are acting as a what, or you are representing them in North Carolina in a what type of capacity? What was the term I used? Fiduciary. A fiduciary capacity. So folks, when you have a client or a principal and you owe them these fiduciary duties, here's how we outline those, okay? The way to remember what we owe a client or a principal is this mnemonic, okay? Old car, or acronym, whatever you want to call it. Old car. Obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, reasonable, skill, and care. Now, I'm going to give you a couple examples. Don't worry, there's slides that articulate this, but yet again, I want to just explain it to you. So, obedience, the first thing that probably comes to mind is a dog, okay? Because they just do what you tell them to do. Well, folks, that is exactly what it is. Obedience. I'm going to translate for you. We are to follow our clients' instructions. If they say jump, we say how high. That is obedience. Now let me take it a step further. It's not all-encompassing obedience. So it is where we have to follow their lawful, willful instructions. So if they say jump, we say how high. If they say go out and commit crimes, we say no thank you. We do not have to listen to them for any illegalities. So let me paint a picture for you. Part of our job as real estate brokers is to advise our sellers on what a reasonable sales price would be, or an appropriate sales price. We do that by way of what's called a CMA, a comparative market analysis, and we'll talk about that in the valuation section. So we're going to do this CMA, and we're going to determine what a probable or reasonable sales price is for their property. And so I want you to picture this. I go to the seller, and I say, well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I think a probable or reasonable sales price for your property should be $425. And here's what the seller says to me. $425, okay, great. $425, cool. $425, decisions. Listen, Seth, I'd like to list it at $1 million. Folks, am I going to list their house at $1 million?
I would think that you would basically impart on them that it may not be feasible, realistic, but I mean, you could still price it at that price, but it would just basically be a waste of time for mutually.
He's not talking about realistic, what we like, everyday practice. He's talking about what you have to do. So yes, you have to list it at $1 million.
Y'all are catching on. Folks, is it illegal to overprice a house? No,
it's just stupid.
There you go. Y'all are on the right track. It is just stupid, but folks, it's not illegal. There is nobody who's going to come out and arrest you for overpricing a house. It's not illegal. So would that be a lawful instruction?
Yes.
So we'd have to do it. Now, folks, please understand, are you obligated to work with everybody in the world? No. But if you elect to be their agent, you are going to follow their lawful, willful instructions. You don't have to be their agent. So when they say that, can you say, no thanks, I'm not interested in representing you, and walk away? Sure you can. But if you are their agent, you owe them all these duties. So that is a lawful, willful instruction. They say jump, we say how high. Now, let's flip a switch here. What if they then turn around after I list it at $1 million and they say, go out there, put a gun to somebody's head and make them pay me $1 million? Are we going to do that?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. Right? No, because that's not a lawful instruction. Now, folks, of course, that's an extreme example. So let me paint another very important picture for you. Remember when I told you about material facts? What did I say a material fact was?
It is facts that can double persuade or facts that can change someone's decision making.
Yeah. Any fact that, if known, could change the person's outlook in going forward with a real estate transaction. That's a material fact. And we are required by law to disclose material facts. Folks, material facts are such a powerful thing. They are actual law in North Carolina. We have to disclose them as real estate licensees. If it could change the outlook of somebody moving forward, we have to tell them about it. Well, these fiduciary duties are under what we call the common law of agency. Common law is based on past case law. It's judicial, not legislative. Now, you don't really need to know all this, terminology from a legal point of view, but what I mean is legislative law supersedes common law. If there's a direct law or rule, then that would be a conflict here and you'd have to follow it. So let me give you an example of this. Folks, if I'm representing a seller as a seller's agent, where are my loyalties?
To the seller.
To the seller. So let's say that the seller's roof leaks. Would that information change the possible outlook of a potential buyer on whether or not they want to buy it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes that leaky roof a material fact. So I want you to listen to this. This is very important. My loyalties are with the seller. And if the seller tells me their roof is leaking, and then they look at me and say, "Don't you tell nobody," that is an unlawful instruction. And I'm not going to follow that. Even though sharing that information hurts my seller. That's where we draw the line on these fiduciary duties. We can't break the law to protect somebody. And so I would have to tell any potential buyer, even though they're customers, that my seller's roof leaks. So obedience is following their lawful, willful instructions. If any of their instructions constitute something illegal, we're not going to adhere to that, and we will tell them that, and we will still disclose it. But if it's not an illegal order, we will do it. Does that make sense? So the next one on here is loyalty. Folks, what does loyalty mean?
Being honest.
Being honest is part of it.
Exclusive.
Could be exclusive.
Loyalty basically just means you got somebody else's back. It means that when they need your help, you have it, and that you're not going to do something to negatively impact them. It just means that you're on their team. You're on their
There you go. That's right.
Don't favor anyone in higher regard.
There you go. They are who we're looking after. We've got their back. We are, on their same team. We're going to take care of them. That's loyalty, right? So I'm going to expand on loyalty some more, but I owe you a break, and I always like to give you a couple extra minutes. So go take a break, come back at 8:40, and I'm going to explain the most important piece about loyalty. So I'll see you back at 8:40. So we are talking about these fiduciary duties, these things that we owe to our clients and our principals under this common law of agency, I told you is what it's called. So I just explained obedience. Obedience is following their lawful, willful instructions. Loyalty, as y'all just told me, is when you are looking after their best interest. And this is where I told you I was going to circle back around to this concept. So when I say looking after their best interest, that means even above our own interest, folks. And so here's where I'm going to tell you something, and you're not going to like it, but you have to understand it. You have to realize that there are so many conversations, so many conversations in the right way, so many questions, question types, and considerations, and your brains, especially not being agents yet, you're always going to wonder about one very important to you concept, and that's money. I can't tell you how often your questions are always about the money. Well, how do you get paid? Well, who's paying? Well, Don't worry about that. I promise you none of the questions are based on that. Yes, of course, there's ways that we get paid. Yes, there's things that you need to be aware of. But you can't answer a question based on that. Now, let me give you the tie-in here. If I was a buyer's agent, who are my loyalties to?
Buyer.
The buyer. So I am looking out for the buyer's best interest. Okay. So I'm going to give you some insight here. Okay. I told you that typically we get paid by the seller or the listing firm, even as a buyer's agent. It's not a set in stone thing. We could be paid by the buyer. And the way that that works is by way of what we call a cooperation agreement. So basically, they would advertise that they were willing to compensate us for bringing them a buyer. And so, let's say that they were offering in the multiple listing service, the MLS is what we call it, multiple listing service, 2.4% commission to anybody who brought a buyer, whether they be a buyer's agent or not. If you bring us a buyer, we'll pay you 2.4%. Well, that's very commonly how this works. So what I'm trying to give you an example of here, here's what I want you to understand. Let's say that you're representing a buyer, and this buyer was interested in multiple homes. And they send you a list of homes that they were interested in going to see. And you look at these homes and you look them up in the MLS, and one of them is offering you a 3% commission. One of them is offering you a 2.4% commission, and one of them is offering you nothing. You cannot elect to not take them to all three. It's not allowed. Because their needs, wants, and desires come before your own. So that is loyalty. Their needs, wants, and desires come before our own. Now, folks, don't panic, okay? Because I know that some of you are like, well, I'm not going to do this job for free. Nobody's expecting you to. You'll find in a minute that when you look at a buyer agency agreement, it states how much we anticipate making. And it says something along the lines of, we will seek to get that compensation from the seller or the listing firm, but if we don't, then we're going to look at you to make up that money and pay us. And that's okay. But I'm telling you, you can't not take them to see the house just because it's not offering what you want. But you are still going to be expected to be paid. But okay with that statement. Their needs, wants, and desires come before our own.
That's the language that they'll use is their needs come before your own. Would that be language on the test?
It may not be that verbatim, but yeah, the same concept. So very similar verbiage, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll take this because Monica asked a good question. Understand that sometimes they will ask you test questions based on these specific things. Like the fiduciary duty that says that you have to put your client's needs above your own would be the fiduciary duty of what? And they're looking for loyalty. They will actually pull these out and ask you individual questions on, well, which duty have you violated if you did this? Well, which duty, states that you have to do this? They will sometimes pull these out and then phrase these as test questions. Okay, so that's loyalty. Disclosure, folks, is disclosure of anything pertinent for them to make good decisions. So let me give you an example here. If I'm a listing agent, I work for the seller. Let's say that I get an offer in. Well, there are rules that state that I have to present that offer within a certain period of time. But let's take this a step further. If I had emails from 30 different agents saying they are going to be sending an offer in on my listing, do you think the seller needs to know that there are 30 potential offers coming in?
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds like some pretty important information to me. So disclosure of all things that could help them make a good decision. Anything and everything I know within the scope of the law. So that's what disclosure is. Confidentiality is keeping their secret secret. Once again, within the scope of the law. I'm not going to keep the secret that their roof leaks. I can't keep that a secret because material facts disclosure says I can't. But folks, if my clients are going through a nasty divorce and that's the reason why they're selling, I'm not going to tell the world that. So you keep their secrets secret within the scope of the law. I wouldn't tell, let me give you an example of this. If I had sellers who, we listed their house at 400, but they told me they would accept 390, I'm not going to tell anybody that. Because if I was to tell a customer that, then I have breached my fiduciary duties. I have specifically breached my obligation of confidentiality. So you keep their secrets secret. I would never tell anybody that my clients would accept less than list price. As a buyer's agent, I would never tell anybody that my buyers would pay more than the price we initially offered. Those are secrets. We're trying to look after our people. Everybody okay with that statement? Monica, you look miserable, right? Like, are there sneezes that you've been doing like this whole night? Like, Monica, I'm just like watching, and she just get like 72 times, I think.
My hair hurts.
Yeah, I bet.
Everything.
Yeah, I bet. I'm sorry. Accounting is accounting for any monies exchanging hands, accounting for documentations, keeping adequate records. And then R is reasonable skill and care. I'm going to translate reasonable skill and care, okay? Don't be an idiot. That's what it translates to. You got to know what you're doing. If you facilitate a transaction and you screw up and you do something that hurts your client, you have breached your fiduciary duties. So reasonable skill and care is knowing how to negotiate, knowing how to fill in a contract, knowing what the steps are. Now, this is not only part of the common law of agency, it is also a part of North Carolina license law and commission rules. It's 93A-6A8, and they articulate it a different way in North Carolina. They say, okay, well, doing anything that would endanger the well-being of your client or acting in a manner of incompetence, something along those lines. So now that I've kind of explained these to you, you can have the visual, and I'll leave them up for a second for you to see them. And as I said, I'm going to share these slides with you. I just didn't get a chance to. They were being temperamental. I was trying to print them off in the PDF that I wanted them, but I'll just share a link with you again. I didn't get those into the chat, but I will. So obedience is following their lawful, willful instructions. Loyalty is putting their needs, wants, and desires above your own. Yeah, I'm just pausing for dramatic effect for those of you who are taking notes. No big deal. So obedience, loyalty, disclosure. Remember, disclosure is filling them in on all information that they would need to make good decisions, potential offers, somebody's, well, let me make a very important statement in regard to disclosure. We're going to get into this more in just a second, okay? I told you that in regard to your clients, you owe your clients confidentiality. You would never share your client's secrets with the rest of the world, but here's a very powerful statement. If you find out confidential information about a customer, you owe that information to your client. So I'm the listing agent. That means my loyalties are to the seller. And if a buyer customer tells me that they are willing to pay up to $500,000, I would have to share that information with a client. So you would never share clients' confidential information to customers, but you have to share customer confidential information to clients. And that would be included in the disclosure, telling them anything and everything they need to know within the scope of the law to help them make the best decision, get the best possible outcome. So confidentiality is keeping their secrets secret within the scope of the law. Material facts would supersede that. You can't keep those secret. You would have to sing like a bird on material facts. What you got, Adriana?
So, if you are the seller's agent and they told you they are selling their parent property as they die in the property, do they have to tell that in the listing or to the buyer's agent?
That they died in the property?
Well, yes, because some people may be a little superstitious.
Not superstitious, I'm just a little stitious, you know what I'm saying? Here's the answer. The answer is, in North Carolina, no. That is not a material fact in North Carolina. So you'll find that as we get into the material facts a little bit more in depth, I'm going to tell you a lot of things that are, but there are specifically named things in North Carolina that we do not consider material facts. Death of the occupant is one of them. Presumably haunted is another one. A sex offender being nearby or being the occupant of a house is not either. All of these things we have specifically named as not a material fact in North Carolina. So that's very fortuitous that you asked that question. That will be a very specific category that will come up in just a moment.
Even if it's a previous crime scene.
Even if it's a previous crime scene, not a material fact. The exception to that, Tim, is a meth house. A meth house is always a material fact in North Carolina. Mm-hmm.
Because that crap gets absorbed through your skin and everything.
That's right. Little Breaking Bad action. All the toxic fumes getting in there and leaching out everywhere. That's exactly right.
Rewatching that show right now. It's great.
There you go.
What about like bodies that was buried in
Bodies that were buried what now?
bodies buried in the backyard, you know, and it
Depends. Were they legally buried or illegally buried? Because nobody's going to disclose that. If they're a serial killer, they're not telling you, okay? Nobody's telling you. Like, you're going to find out the hard way. When you go to dig up and put your pool in, Tim, that's when you're going to find out, right? Oh, my God, this was Jeffrey Dahmer's house? Yeah. Yeah, somebody being buried in the backyard would actually constitute a material fact because it is lawful to bury people on private property as long as it gets permitted and done a certain way in most municipalities. And so if Mima is buried in the backyard, you should probably tell people so then that way they don't try to dig them up. Now that's a little more outside of the scope of this class, but it is a discussion that we have in like post-licensing for things to be aware of. So, yeah. What you got, Sandeep?
Let's say Asian is Asian is not very transparent or not disclosing any. You know, if you feel like the Asian isn't disclosing anything that you're supposed to know, is that on Asian or the agency?
Is it on the individual licensee or on the firm? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Ultimately, both, because you hired the firm and that person was acting on behalf of the firm. They're both in trouble.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the last two pieces, here's the visual for it. Accounting, right? Accounting for all funds, due diligence money, earnest money. We'll talk more about those later. Documentation, keeping adequate records. I'll go ahead and tell you about another North Carolina law and rule that you need to know about. In North Carolina, we have a record retention rule. All records in North Carolina have to be maintained for 3 years from the date of last activity. 3 years from the date of last activity. And then reasonable skill and care, you've got to be able to do things in a way that you are taking care of them, that you know what you're doing, you're not screwing up the transaction, that you have the skill, the expertise to facilitate this effectively. You price the house right with your CMA, you negotiate things appropriately. That's what we mean there. Now here's another interesting thing to understand, and I don't know to what extent you're going to see this on your North Carolina side of your test because it's, it's changed recently. And so I don't think this really historically existed a lot on the North Carolina portion, but with the addition of these questions, it may become prevalent. I told you that you would never disclose client confidential information to a customer, but that you had to disclose customer confidential information to a client. That statement makes sense for everybody, right? Well, I also told you that when your agency relationship ends, your client becomes a what? Customer. So, under normal circumstances, when our relationship ends with somebody, we're not going to use our knowledge of their secrets to turn around and hurt them. Not that there's that many opportunities that arise. So in other words, just because our relationship ended, we're not going to turn around and try to do anything that would cause them any harm. However, understand that there are times we are hired by people and we are representing them as their agent. That relationship ends, and now our knowledge of that person may become pertinent information to a new client. And so if that does arise and our loyalties have changed, our allegiances have changed, then we may be obligated to share that information with a new client. Let me give you an example. Monica hires me to sell her house. And Monica and I are having a conversation, and Monica says, well, Seth, I'll list it at $400, but if I got $375, I'd be ecstatic. I said, great. And I endeavored to sell it over the next 3 months because that's what our agency agreement maybe was for. And I couldn't sell it for whatever reason. And she doesn't renew it, and she gets rid of me. She kicks me to the curb. And she hires somebody else to list her house. So now she calls Dora to list her house. Okay. So Dora lists her house for sale. And I get a phone call from Sam. And Sam says, hey, Seth, I found you online as an agent, and I'd like you to assist me in buying a house. I said, great, Sam, love to. What's the address? And she tells me. I said, well, hold up. Wait a dang minute. That's that house of Monica's that I just had listed. Well, now, folks, I was Monica's agent, but I'm not anymore. Now she's a customer. Now I'm Sam's agent, and now that confidential information I have on Monica would help Sam, my client. So I would most likely be obligated to share with Sam that Monica would accept $375 because my loyalties have changed. We're not going to go out to hurt anybody after our relationship ends. But when something like this arises, it could cause us to have to share it. So, old car is what we owe clients. I told you we owe certain things to customers, and now let me tell you what that is. When I ask you what do we owe to customers, the answer is honesty and fairness and material facts. Why? Because we owe material facts to everybody. Folks, the way that I want you to remember material facts, listen, I'm going to use some song lyrics, okay? We owe material facts disclosure to everybody in the club getting tipsy. Okay? And it's spelled exactly like that. Okay? It's everybody. E-R-R-R-R-Y body. Everybody. Everybody gets material facts disclosure. Clients, customers, doesn't matter. Everybody in the Club Getting Tipsy gets material facts disclosures because they supersede old car. It's not about whom we represent for material facts. Anything we know, reasonably should have known, that could change a person's outlook in purchasing a property would constitute a material fact, and we'd have to share it. Sing like a bird. But aside from the material facts we owe everybody, when I say what do we owe customers, we owe them honesty and fairness. Now, here's the problem with that. Folks, I just told you that if we had customer confidential information, we had to share it to who?
Client.
A client.
Your client.
Your client. And so let me really tell you what the honesty and fairness is. The honesty and fairness we owe customers is looking them in the face and saying, don't tell me your secret, stupid, or I'll take you to the cleaners. This is where we live in an absolute world of absolutes. If you're not with us, we're against you. So you're either our person or you're not our person. I'll give you a nerdy reference to help you with this. Folks, and you know, there's a couple of you that are just going to go right for this, and a couple of you absolutely not. How many of y'all have seen Star Wars in here? Okay, all right, yeah. Some of you are like, nah. I'll give you the abridged version just for those of you who have not watched Star Wars, okay? Spoiler alert, in the prequels, Anakin's Darth Vader, okay? And in one part of the movie, he says, if you're not with me, you're my enemy. And then somebody's like, only a Sith deals in absolutes, right? Obi-Wan says that to him. And so that's how we are, folks. We're like Siths. If you're not with me, you're my enemy. If I'm representing the buyer, I'm going to rip the seller a new one. I am going for blood for the buyer. That seller is screwed. If I'm representing the seller, that buyer is screwed, right? We are going for our person, and if you're not our person, we are out to get you. But we can't do it deceptively. We owe you honesty and fairness to the extent that we would have to look you in the face and say, I don't work for you, I don't represent you, and I will try to take advantage of you, so don't give me the opportunity to do that. That's the honesty and fairness we owe them. Now, we're going to get into that. That falls under what we call agency disclosure. Folks, think back to where we started the night. And I gave you the story of how it used to work. And Eliza and I were hanging out. I never told her who I worked for. That's not honest or fair. So that's why we have agency disclosures now. So we have to tell you who we work for. So now, in today's day and age, if I was working for Misty as my seller and Eliza calls me interested in that property, I would tell Eliza before I showed her that house, hey, Eliza, just so you know, I can show you this house, but I don't represent you. I represent Misty, the seller. That's part of that honesty and fairness. It's what we call an agency disclosure. We've got to tell them how this works. Otherwise, they wouldn't know it. Think about it. How many of you knew that it was this deep-rooted before you got into this class, more specifically before tonight? Most of you didn't. What you got, Jacob?
So play along with me in this hypothetical situation real quick.
Okay.
An agent, not I guess a sub-agent, can be involved in multiple deals at once, right? I mean, they don't expect somebody to just only work for one person at one time. You have multiple clients at a time, typically.
Correct.
If you're fortunate enough.
Sure.
And that's not to say that you can only do. Okay, you can only be seller's agents or buyer's agents at the same time. You can do both, right? What about the situation in which I am a seller's agent and I happen to also be the buyer's agent for somebody who would potentially be interested in the property of the seller's agent? In that case, I mean, how does that play out? I mean, are there rules or limitations there, or is it self-explanatory and it's just, I can sell it to this person and I just get paid double commission?
There are big rules and limitations there, because I want you to answer your own question. If you owe all of this to a seller, and you owe all of this to a buyer who wants to buy that seller's house, what do you do?
Exactly. So can we touch on that for a sec?
We're going to touch on that for more than a second, but not yet. That would be a type of dual agency.
All right.
And it's exceptionally testable. We're not there quite yet. But you're asking really good questions. Because, of course, that's a very important concept. It's a very testable concept. So we owe customers honesty, fairness, disclosure of material facts, because we owe disclosure of material facts to everybody. And then we also always have to comply with license laws and commission rules. Okay, that's just a given. Otherwise, we can be subject to disciplinary action. So there are, in these agency relationships, duties from and to the different parties. And those are outlined in your agency contracts, right? Your agency agreements. So the duties to the agent from the principal or the client. Well, to act in good faith, to endeavor into whatever it is that they are endeavoring to do. Seller agrees to show the house. Seller agrees to make the house show ready. Seller agrees to, sign paperwork. If we sell the house, they agree to pay us. Same thing. Buyers agree to show up for appointments. Buyers agree to fill out their lending paperwork. So there's duties from the principal to us as agents, or to the firm, should I say, as the agent. And when we're dealing with, and let me make a statement here. When we're dealing with agent obligations to clients and customers, you got a good picture of that. When we're dealing with obligations from the consumers, that's a very, very different ballgame. And we're going to talk more about this in a second, but some states, and this is an interesting thing, some states require the seller to disclose things about their house. Some states it is mandatory. If there's an issue, the seller has to disclose it. North Carolina is not one of those states, as weird as that sounds. So, did you have a question?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I said it's stupid.
Oh, it's stupid.
That's how I ended up with my situation.
Yeah, it's stupid. So in North Carolina, sellers do not owe any disclosure to buyers. We're going to talk about that. It's an old school doctrine called the doctrine of caveat emptor. I'm going to table that for a second. But they do have an obligation to not commit fraud. They do have an obligation to not lie. So sellers can't lie. Sellers can't defraud people. But they also don't have an obligation to tell the buyers anything. So
it sounds like you got to be sure to ask the right questions.
Well, it's not even so much of the right questions, because if you ask the right questions, they could still say, I'm not telling you nothing. But there is ways that we have to navigate this in North Carolina, certain ways to try to protect people, and that's why there's a lot of obligations on agents, on brokers. So when we're dealing with, specific performance, I'm going to table that too. I don't think this is a good place to talk about that. We'll talk about that in the contract section. Okay? That is just a remedy that's available for a breach of contract, a very specific one, as the name implies. But I don't want to talk about it yet. So let's dive into material facts. I've been talking about them. They're very testable. And I told you that a material fact is anything that, if known, could change the outlook of a party in completing a transaction. That's a material fact. Anything that, if known, could change the outlook of a party in completing a transaction. Now, in North Carolina, we have license laws and commission rules, which we're going to delve into a little bit more. And I taught you some of these things on day one. That was kind of where we started. Licensing categories are a part of this. We'll talk about composition of the real estate commission as part of this. But there is a list of what we call prohibited acts. Prohibited acts is basically a list of things under license law in North Carolina that says if you are found guilty of doing any of these things, you are subject to disciplinary action by the real estate commission. And there is a very specific one in that list that says if an agent is found guilty of committing a misrepresentation or an omission of a material fact, they're subject to disciplinary action by the commission. Now, that's all the law says. And so in that North Carolina License Law and Commission Rulebook, there's what we call the comment section. The comment section expands on the information. It basically gives you examples and it kind of dumbs it down to what we call layman speak. So it's easier to understand. And in the comment section, you will see that they break it down into categories. And so they basically say as material facts at minimum include these 4 categories. Facts about the property itself, facts relating directly to the property, facts relating directly to the ability of the agent's principal to complete the transaction, and any facts known to be of special importance to a party. I'm going to show you this really quick. If you go to the Real Estate Commission's website, and you have a copy of this already, but I'm just pulling it up in an easier place. The License Law and Commission Rulebook. I'm going to take you to it. Now, folks, this book, it's a doozy, but it is very testable, at least the parts that are on the syllabus. But I'm going to show you the section that I'm talking about. Right here on page 11, disciplinary action by the Commission, 93A-6. The Commission has power, and I'll zoom in a little bit here. Now, this is North Carolina specific right now. The Commission has power to take disciplinary action upon its own initiative or on the complaint of any person. The Commission may investigate the actions of any person or entity licensed under this chapter, or any other person or entity who shall assume to act in such a capacity. If the Commission finds probable cause that a licensee has violated any of the provisions of this chapter, the Commission may hold a hearing on the allegations of misconduct. The Commission has the power to suspend or revoke at any time a license issued under the provisions of this chapter, or to reprimand or censure any licensee if, following a hearing, the Commission adjudges the licensee to be guilty of. Now, folks, there are 15 things. Starts with number 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then back up over here to 15. There's 15 of them. I promise you, these are all testable on the North Carolina portion of the exam. I'm not going to get into all of them yet. We're going to focus on number 1. Making any willful or negligent misrepresentation or any willful or negligent omission of a material fact. That's what we're talking about right now. It is a very specific licensed law in North Carolina. But I told you that's all that it states. Now, the way that this book works, I'm going to scroll back up to the top and show you. I don't expect you to read this from cover to cover. To do so would be such a huge waste of your time. I expect you to focus on the laws and rules that are outlined in the syllabus as testable. But if you look at the breakdown, license law, commission rules, and comments. The comment section rehashes some of the laws and rules and gives you easier to understand layman's terms on them. So let me show you what I mean. If I go down to page 102, it's more specifically 106, but I'll type in 102. We've got the comment section, and you'll see that it references different laws like 93A-2 and 93A-3 and things of that nature. So if I go down, I'm going to find right here 93A-6A1. You do not need to know these numbers. 93A-6A1, you don't need to know that number. You need to know what the rules are. You need to know how they're testable. So here's where it gets into misrepresentations and omissions. And so it says for the purposes of applying General Statute 93A-6A1, whether a fact is material depends on the facts and circumstances of a particular transaction and the application of statutory and/or case law. The Commission has historically interpreted material facts under the real estate license law to include at least, here's those 4 categories I just introduced to you. Facts about the property itself, facts relating directly to the property, facts relating directly to the ability of the agent's principal to complete the transaction, and any facts that are known to be of special importance to a party. Now, I'm not going to read these to you, but I'm just telling you, these are extremely testable. And if you go further, this is where they talk about things that are not material. Death or serious illness of previous property occupant, convicted sex offender, and then it also goes into a little more detail, and I'm going to talk about these. But what I want you to see, though, is in this section, there are examples of what would constitute these different things. Now, I'm not going to introduce them yet because I need you to understand some verbiage first. So let's just start with facts about the property itself. Okay, what do you think I mean? What might constitute a fact about the property itself that would be material?
That it carries an easement.
That it carries an easement, sure.
If it's on septic or, I mean, if the foundation is in decent quality, I mean, if they have like an inspection to find out the foundation has a crack in it or something like that, like that's the type of thing you have to disclose to.
Sure. All of that. What else?
Any structural damage?
Structural damage, yep.
Any
Sales.
of land use?
Yeah. Folks, this is the more obvious stuff, okay? Water damage, cracks in the foundation, easements, leaky roof, electrical issues, Understand, by definition, a material fact does not have to be a negative thing. It doesn't. But it typically is, but it doesn't have to be a negative thing. Think about it. What if somebody purchased a property, and after they bought that property, they found out that there was $6 million worth of oil underneath it? That's a good thing. Well, the odds that the neighboring property has oil underneath it, pretty good. And so telling somebody that their house may have $6 million of oil underneath it could be a material fact. Because would that change their outlook on whether or not they're going to sell it? Don't get so caught up on defects. A positive thing could be a material fact as well. But when we're talking about facts about the property itself, we typically are referencing these very commonplace, most associated defects. So if we know that the roof leaks, we would have to tell somebody. If we know there's foundation issues, we would have to tell somebody. Understand, though, material facts we have to disclose as agents. But I told you, North Carolina, because of this doctrine of caveat emptor, the sellers don't have to disclose this to the buyers. But if we know, we have to disclose. So let's go to the next one. If I say facts relating directly to the property, what do you think I might mean?
Deed restrictions?
Deed restrictions? What else?
If the property was formerly foreclosed?
Maybe.
Encroachments?
Maybe. Let me help you out, because some of these are a little more outside the box. What if there's a train track nearby and the whole house shakes when a train comes by? Would that change somebody's outlook? Mm-hmm. What if it was right next to the airport and you heard airplanes flying overhead? Would that change somebody's outlook? What if it was next to a landfill and you smelled garbage every day? Would that change somebody's outlook? What if they wanted, a property where they could have chickens and the deed restrictions didn't allow it, as Minot said, or maybe the ordinances don't allow it? Folks, anything that relates to the property that could change somebody's desirability to purchase it, sell it, or otherwise. So zoning, pending zoning changes, upcoming construction, a highway coming nearby, landfills, noises, toxic fumes, hog farms, anything that could affect somebody's desire to buy this property based on surrounding things. Not necessarily the property itself, but because it's proximity to something else or something else restricting it, these could constitute material facts. Okay, well, let's talk about the next one. If I said facts relating directly to the ability of the agent's principal to complete the transaction, what do I mean?
The ability to secure financing?
Ability to secure financing. If you lose your job and you can't buy anymore, folks, that's a material fact. If you don't qualify in the first place, but you're trying to put an offer in anyway, that's a material fact. What else?
What about a pending divorce?
So the divorce, let's talk about this one. The divorce itself is not a material fact. However, if one of the spouses won't sign, that means you can't convey clear title. That would be a material fact, right? Willingness of a spouse to sign or not would be a material fact. The divorce in and of itself, no. As long as everybody's in compliance and they're going to go forward with it, not a material fact, then that would be that confidentiality piece. And that's where I said you keep their secret within the scope of the law. Them going through divorce, you wouldn't tell anybody. Them going through divorce and one of the spouses won't sign, that's a material fact. You got to tell somebody. How about a pending foreclosure?
Just thinking like half the money leaving the transaction.
Well, and as long as there's enough money to pay off all liens, it's still not a problem. Yeah.
Okay.
Pending foreclosure, that'd be a material fact. What if the bank's in the process of potentially foreclosing on it? It may not ever go to closing. If it's a short sale, all these things might be material facts that affect the ability of the principal to complete the transaction. Now, do note that a seller missing a payment or two doesn't automatically constitute a foreclosure, doesn't automatically constitute a material fact, because presumably if they have enough equity, they could make up the money that they missed payments on when they sell. And then the last one, I'm going to help you out. Facts known to be of specific or special importance to a party. This could be anything, folks. If they tell you it's important to them, it becomes a material fact almost immediately. I need a place where I can have my chickens. Now it's a material fact that you have to have a place that allows chickens. I need a place where I can have my horses. I need a place where I can rent out a second premises. I need a place where I can build a fence. I need a place. If they tell you they don't want to be near a cemetery, they tell you that they want to be near the Krispy Kreme. It could be basically anything. Now, this is not going to change in North Carolina the things that are not material. Yes, somebody may want to know if somebody died in a property. But we have specifically named in North Carolina that that's not material. Even if they want to know it, it's not material. And this also doesn't allow us to violate any other laws, like fair housing laws. So if they say, I want to be in a place where there's other Hispanic speaking people, or Hispanic people who speak Spanish. We can't do that. That's a violation of fair housing. We're going to talk more about fair housing later. But anything within the scope of the law that's not illegal could be material in this regard. So here's where I told you what is not material, and you just saw it in the back of the License on Commission rule book. Okay, we classify what we call stigmatized properties. That's the term we use. They're not desirable. They're got some issues. There's this branded by society as undesirable kind of concepts, but they're not material in North Carolina. And so whether somebody died in the property, whether there was a site of criminal activity, whether there's a sex offender occupying the property or nearby, all of these things may be stigmatized. They may be poo-pooed upon, frowned upon, but they're not material facts. When I say they're not material facts, that means in North Carolina, if you didn't disclose them, you're not in trouble with the Real Estate Commission. Now, as an agent, you cannot lie. So if you know that somebody died in the property and they ask you, did anybody die here? You got two options. You can tell the truth, say, yep. Or you can say, well, that's not a material fact in North Carolina and I'd rather not disclose. Which kind of, in a roundabout way, tells them. Now, one important note, folks. While these are not material, can you offer up this information? Sure. Can you advise them on how to find this information? Sure. With the exception of this middle one. Whether somebody has had or died from AIDS or HIV, you can't touch that with a 10-foot pole, even if you know it. Because AIDS and HIV is protected under disability and fair housing. So to answer that question would be a violation of fair housing laws, and real estate brokers are always bound by fair housing laws. Now, it seems kind of weird. Some of you are probably thinking, well, that seems like a very oddly specific thing. I'll tell you why it exists. Folks, I used to work with an instructor who was much older than I. And when we would teach this, he would tell a story about when he was a kid, he would get on his bike to go to a friend's house. And his mom would have him ride his bike on one side of the road, but when he got to a certain house, he had to stop, cross the road, and go down that way, and then cross back over. You know why? Because the lady who lived in that house had cancer. Folks, people have not always known how things spread. So back in the day, you didn't get around other people that had cancer because you thought you might catch cancer. And when the AIDS and HIV epidemic became a big thing back in the 70s, same thing. People would not get near them. They were becoming very discriminatory towards these people because they didn't know how you got it. And none of us wanted to catch AIDS by being near somebody and dying. And so it became a big discriminatory push, to the extent that they had to actually include it under the disability for fair housing. So that's why this comes into play. It's not like it's a very common discussion nowadays because of modern medicine and our understanding. But when fair housing was kind of a bigger thing and they were adding in all these protected classes, this was a much bigger thing. What you got, Misty?
Many years ago, Seth, I sold a haunted house. And I didn't believe it was haunted. I didn't believe in that. But I will tell you, 3 months after she bought it, she gave me a call and I went by and all of her things were outside under the carport and she was moving.
Interesting.
It was interesting. It was interesting.
Yeah, and so that's the funny thing. Yeah, some people don't even believe in that, right? And so North Carolina, a presumably haunted house is not a material fact. Now, some states, this is important, some states death would be a material fact. Some states haunted would be a material fact. Not North Carolina. Okay? Specifically in North Carolina, these things are not material. That's crazy, though.
Well, I did sell a haunted house.
See,
so the ghost moved her furniture to the carport?
No. I think she moved the furniture because she was in such a hurry to get out. But wouldn't that be convenient, right? I'd be in the house like, can you at least put it in the truck? Dang. You know?
Well, Tim, within 3 months of buying it, I mean, that's pretty intense. She just bought it. Within 3 months, she had moved herself outside the carport and was leaving, staying with friends.
Now, Misty, here's the trick. Nowadays, in 2024, with all the weirdos in the world, that's a selling point. You list it and you tell people it's a haunted house, they're going to turn it into an Airbnb. Right? Come stay at the haunted house, $400 a night. Let's see if you can stay for more than 20 minutes or whatever, right? That's a selling point now. You can, just market it that way. But back in the day.
Really interesting because my husband went with me when I was showing her the house. And it was uncomfortable in there, but I just thought, she was a little kooky anyway. But yeah, it actually turned out to be a haunted house. It really did.
Yeah, that's right, Kirsten. TikTok heaven. Yeah, well, a little kooky, little haunted, a little bit of both, I reckon. Some people believe in it, some people don't. Sometimes you have to experience it, I reckon. I don't know. So these stigmatized things, these are not considered haunted, not considered material facts in North Carolina. And so please understand that with the exception of the AIDS HIV one, which would be a violation of fair housing, you could steer people in the right direction. So if somebody was worried about a sex offender living nearby, you could voluntarily give them the information to look up the sex offender database. By the way, folks, I'm going to give you something that I know you could possibly see on your test. It is called Megan's Law. Megan's Law is the law that was enacted to create the sex offender database. It is named after a victim named Megan from a sex offender. So Megan's Law can be seen on your test. So if you ever see Megan's Law, it has to do with sex offenders and the registry, the database. But you can tell your clients how to access the database. I don't recommend doing it for them, but you can say, here's the address, go to this database and look up if there's any sex offenders in the area if that's important to you. That's okay. The sex offenders are not a protected class under fair housing. You can tell people to look them up.
Question is, since it's not considered a material fact, but the question of Megan's Law may be on the exam, what type of question or what would they be questioning us in regards to the law?
Well, understand that they could, just because it's not because it's not a law doesn't mean that it's not going to be on the test. And so they may say something like, which of the following would not be a material fact under North Carolina license laws or commission rule? And, the proximity of a sex offender would not be a material fact. Then otherwise, Josh, you could say, which of the following does Megan's Law have to deal with? And it may say, material facts. It may say, construction. It may say lead-based paint and sex offender database. And you would have to know that Megan's Law pertains to the sex offender database. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to put up this last slide here because I'm going to let you just chit-chat with me for the next little bit. But folks, for whatever reason, these material facts, it's not enough for you to just know what is and what isn't a material fact. They also want you to know in North Carolina how you can be looked at as guilty. And so they get very specific. When we're dealing with material facts, you can get in trouble for a willful or negligent misrepresentation or omission. And you have to be able to identify specifically which one has occurred. So if I say willful, what does that mean?
Intentionally.
Intentional, deliberate, you were aware. If I say negligent, what does that mean?
That you knew, but you didn't say anything.
No, that's an omission. Negligence, you got to keep them separate, right? You can't, what does the word negligence mean?
It's an unintentional omission.
And don't throw in omission into it. Negligence in and of itself is just something unintentional. You didn't do your job right. Okay? Willful is intentional. Yeah, there you go. It's you didn't do your job right. You didn't know something, but you should have known because it was your obligation to know, something like that, right? That's negligence. Now, folks, a misrepresentation is stating an untruth. And an omission is stating nothing when you had an obligation to state something. So let me give you an example. Stephanie knew that the cellar's roof leaks. And when asked, Stephanie said the roof is in great condition. If you were to identify this using both terms, what would that be referred to as?
Willful misrepresentation.
Willful misrepresentation, because Stephanie knew. There's these key words, right? Stephanie knew that the cellar's roof leaks. That's willful. But she stated that it didn't. That is a lie. So willful misrepresentation, she's a liar, liar, pants on fire. Now I'm going to make one statement here, and we'll dive deeper into these tomorrow, because this is where people get confused. All right? If I say that Jacob knew of a pending zoning change that would adversely affect the property, and when I called him to ask if there was any zoning changes, Jacob said no. What is Jacob committed?
Willful misrepresentation.
Willful omission.
No, it's not omission, because omission means that it's something that I would have to just simply not bring up. But it's misrepresentation because it was just a downright lie. It's not withholding the truth, it's a straight up lie.
There you go, folks. You have to understand, even though all he said was no, he did say something. This is very commonly where people get hung up, right? They're like, oh no, he didn't tell you, that's an omission. No, he did tell me something. He said no. The only way you can commit an omission is saying nothing. So if you say something, even as simple as no, it's a misrepresentation. So he knew of the zoning change and told me no, that is still a willful misrepresentation. Now, if Jacob knew about a pending zoning change, and I never called him and asked, and he never told me, now Jacob is guilty of a what?
Willful omission.
Willful omission. He knew, which makes it willful. He had an obligation to disclose, and he said nothing. Remember, I'm not obligated to ask that question, but he's still obligated to disclose material facts as a licensee, as a broker, right? So you got to be very careful because they do make you differentiate these. The biggest recommendation is on the test, break it into two pieces. Figure out if it was willful or negligent first, then figure out if it was a misrepresentation or an omission. And you're going to see telltale words. Knew, was aware, was told, tells you willful. Didn't know, didn't research, use inaccurate information, tells you negligence. Said something, wrote something, disclosed something, misrepresentation. Didn't say, didn't disclose, didn't post, omission. So you break them into their pieces and then you kind of combine them together to figure out which is what. And for whatever reason, these are testable. Now, this is where you will see these in the License on Commission rulebook. They have the examples, as I just showed you. For a negligent misrepresentation, examples. Willful misrepresentation, examples. Now, I'm just saying, folks, if I was the real estate commission and I was testing you on these concepts, I might utilize questions very similar to the examples that I outline in my law and rule book. I don't know for a fact that they do or don't. I'm just saying it would make sense to me. So that's why I point out where all those examples are to help you, especially if you struggle with this kind of concept on what they would constitute willful versus negligent, all those things. So, folks, how are we feeling? Just a couple minutes left tonight. Nobody's panicking about agency yet. Everybody's okay. Dora, that face did not look reassuring.
Well, what does opened mean for misrepresentation?
This is just a funny way of saying it. You opened your mouth. You said something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Jacob, ready to go make a cup of tea and have NyQuil. Listen, you can just do what little Wayne does. Just make some whiskey with your NyQuil. You'll be out. No, that's bad advice. Don't do that. Okay? I'm just kidding.
It's not that bad of advice.
I'm pretty sure your liver would disagree. Folks, thanks for being awesome tonight. I got about 30 seconds left. As you're reading through and going through this stuff, of course, agency is a very tough concept. We got lots more to cover. We got to get into dual. We got to get into the agency agreements more, and then we'll continue to expand on it. But you're doing great. I haven't seen anybody crying, panicking, or throwing up yet from anything I've thrown at you, so that makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. So we will continue the agency discussions tomorrow. We will pick up here with these misrepresentations, omissions, and all these different things and move into the other things. Yeah, that's right. As long as you do it off camera, Jacob, it still makes me feel better, right? You just panic and cry yourself to sleep tonight, and you're like, agency. No, I think you are feeling great about it, which is good. So, folks, thank you all for being awesome. Have a great night.